Chapter 1292. Han Fei was confused. What did she mean? He had always thought that the woman surnamed Bai was thrown into the demon-subduing tower as soon as she was born. Why was her father here? A glaring King Kong appeared. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but when Han Fei used the power of Law Enforcer again, he found that this King Kong seemed to be alive. Under normal circumstances, the power of Law Enforcer, to some extent, symbolized the path a person took. For example, this King Kong phantom. Han Fei actually wanted to take the path of body refinement, a path closer to the invincible realm. But at this moment, his path had become a bridge of white mist, and he had only revealed a little bit of his power, which seemed to have nothing to do with the power of Law Enforcer. Han Fei had thought that his power of Law Enforcer didn't blend with his path, but it seemed that this was not the case. On the contrary, the power of Law Enforcer seemed to have become stronger. Because Han Fei had forged a half-golden body, his body was at least as strong as that of a half-venerable. Even if he didn't use the power of Law Enforcer and let these yellow sand blades hit his body, they might not be able to break his body. However, Han Fei thought that the creatures that could survive in the demon-subduing tower must have their own uniqueness, not to mention a powerful creature that occupied a corner of the first floor. Perhaps he still had some special methods? But when the woman surnamed Bai called him father, Han Fei knew that this woman didn't seem to be so simple. This demon-subduing tower didn't seem to be so simple. If this woman's parents were both in this demon-subduing tower, why did this woman go to the first floor of the demon-subduing tower? Could it be that the child born on the fourth floor automatically appeared on the first floor without going through the teleportation array? Han Fei and the woman surnamed Bai were both waiting, but the yellow attack didn't weaken. The woman surnamed Bai was also covered with a layer of white scale armor, and clanking sound were also made when she was hit. Han Fei's perception swept over and over again, but he didn't find any special creatures in this sea of sand. Except for some dry bones under this sea of sand, there seemed to be no living creatures. Han Fei couldn't help asking, "Miss Bai, are you sure your father is here?" The force of the sand was getting stronger and stronger. Did he not hear it? Why don't you shout again? While talking, Han Fei said to the old turtle, "Old Yuan, where are the creatures in this sea of sand? Why didn't I sense it?" The old turtle's voice was unhurried. "Dead, buried at the bottom of the sea of sand." Han Fei's face slightly changed, and his perception was about to explore the sea of sand crazily, when the old turtle said, "Don't. It's coming out." Han Fei felt that his blood was freezing. "Wait, didn't you say he was dead? Why did you come out again?" The old turtle sneered. "Kid, don't tell me you haven't seen this much. An undying being. Wouldn't a cultivator at the peak of the Tao-seeking realm be dead?" Han Fei narrowed his eyes and asked, "Change my vocation?" Hearing the word change, Han Fei knew that there must be a big story. Li Daxian, the ancestor of the Thug clan, was also an undying being. If the human's will and strength were preserved, then what was the difference between an undying being and a living being? Hula, the yellow sand rose as if a hill was rising from the ground. At this moment, a rather beautiful human corpse finally appeared in Han Fei's perception. Although the corpse's white clothes were broken and his face was extremely pale, his eyebrows were eye-catching, heroic, and he looked extremely steady and calm. A human? Han Fei was stunned for a moment. Sure enough, the old turtle was right. Was this woman born from a human and a sea demon? Han Fei couldn't help but wonder if the child of a human and a sea demon could look like this girl. It would be totally acceptable. She was born full of immortal air. What's wrong with raising such a daughter? Bam! The sand dune exploded, and the middle-aged man in a long robe, with a pale and cold face, stood on the sea of sand, quietly looking at the woman surnamed Bai. At this moment, the flying sand suddenly stopped. Han Fei secretly breathed a sigh of relief. This man didn't look weak. After all, the scene of a father and a daughter meeting was better than the scene of a father and a daughter killing each other. The woman surnamed Bai seemed a little excited and called out again, "Father." The middle-aged man's head was raised a little stiffly, as if he was thinking hard or thinking about something. Han Fei found that something was wrong and shouted, "Old Yuan, what's going on? Isn't this man an undying being? Why does it seem that he doesn't know his daughter now?" The old turtle said they should know each other. Just wait patiently. Han Fei stepped back a little. It was not good for him to be a third wheel when the father and daughter met. The middle-aged man stared at the woman in white for a long time, and his face began to twist slightly, as if in pain. Then, in the yellow sand, vines stretched out one after another. In a moment, the vines had covered the space of dozens of kilometers. Han Fei watched that these vines were slowly emerging from the bottom of the sea, dragging a ball that was wrapped in it. When the ball wrapped by vines and algae appeared, Han Fei, the woman surnamed Bai, and the white snake all looked at it. And the middle-aged man slowly walked to the ball, raised his hand slightly, and the vines spread out. He saw a half-human, half-snake woman curled up in the middle of it. The snake demon clenched her fists as if she were afraid of the cold, and looked very pitiful. Han Fei immediately sensed that this man was not dead, but he was already in his twilight years. She was seriously lacking vitality and seemed to be dying at any time. On the woman's body, the skin in some places was pierced by extremely thin vines and extended into her body. In the vines there was still the power of vitality slowly nourishing this woman. Han Fei immediately took a breath. This man turned into an undying being and used all his vitality on his wife. The old turtle grunted. It should be so. Moreover, this person has been working hard to suppress his own cultivation, sealing his own strength, and letting himself fall into a deep slumber. Han Fei narrowed his eyes. That's why he attacked at the beginning. After he came out, he showed a painful look. In fact, his seal is being unlocked. The old turtle said, "Once the seal is unlocked, I'm afraid it's not up to him anymore. I'm afraid he has to go to the 5th level, break through, and reach the 6th level." At this moment, the middle-aged man gently stroked the snake demon. "Madam, our daughter is here." Even Han Fei was a little moved by her words. What exactly happened back then? Why did things end up like this? Hearing these words, the woman surnamed Bai couldn't help but shed a line of tears. And the white snake, with its propped-up body, slowly lay on the shoulder of the woman surnamed Bai, looking very sad. Under the call of the middle-aged man, the haggard, thin snake demon quickly absorbed the vitality of the spiritual plant and then slowly opened her eyes. However, the moment she opened her eyes, Han Fei clearly felt that her vitality was fading away. The speed was so fast that Han Fei could directly perceive it. Not only Han Fei, but the woman surnamed Bai and the white snake could also feel it, because the snake demon's hair was slowly turning yellow. Although it hadn't turned white yet, it should be soon. The woman surnamed Bai stepped in front of the snake demon and shouted in panic, "Mother!" Han Fei couldn't help but say, "Her vitality is fading away. At this rate, she'll die in less than 2 hours." The woman surnamed Bai quickly looked at Han Fei and then at the middle-aged man in panic. The middle-aged man tried to put on a smile on his face. "An hour is enough. Girl, I want to see you, but I'm afraid to see you, because if we meet again, it will be farewell forever. I'm in a dilemma." The middle-aged man's eyes were gentle. He looked at the woman surnamed Bai deeply and then at the snake demon, before he heaved a long sigh. The so-called farewell meant that when the snake demon died and he unlocked himself, they could only be together for a few hours at most. For the first time, Bai Ling slithered down from the woman's body and climbed to the snake demon's body. When the snake demon opened its eyes and saw Bai Ling and the woman surnamed Bai, it was overjoyed and tears glistened in its eyes. The snake demon looked at the middle-aged man in shock. "Is it really a girl?" The man in the middle nodded. "I know. My son is blessed." The snake demon immediately burst into tears of joy and grabbed the woman surnamed Bai's hand, unwilling to let go. The woman surnamed Bai thought that she could reunite with her family after searching for them all the way. However, as soon as they met, they would be separated forever. After all, she was still a girl who had never seen the world. How could she withstand such a test? The woman surnamed by asked, "Why did this happen?" The middle-aged man reached out and gently stroked her hair, as if he felt somewhat guilty. As a human heavenly talent, it was taboo for me to marry your mother. Maybe our marriage violated the heavenly Tao. When I gave birth to you, the weather changed, and an earth-shaking white lotus appeared. To avoid being hunted by my enemies, I hid in the demon-subduing tower to avoid the disaster. Who could have known that your mother, I, and you fell on different floors of the tower because of our different realms? I had to lower my realm to look for you. Unfortunately, I could only find your mother in the end. At that time, you were still a baby and had no power to protect yourself. I thought that you might be in danger, but you were born with great luck, and you should be blessed. But your mother's chi and blood are deficient, and her vitality is almost non-existent. That's why I had to cultivate the undead art to protect your mother. The snake demon said with guilt, "Girl, don't blame me for not lowering my realm to look for you. If I lowered my realm, not only would I not be able to find you, but I would also probably die." The woman surnamed Bai and the white spirit python certainly wouldn't blame him at this moment. Their eyes were full of tears. Han Fei's head was buzzing, and he couldn't help but ask in surprise, "The earth-shaking white lotus?" The middle-aged man glanced at Han Fei. Seeing that Han Fei didn't have any killing intent and came with his daughter, he said, "Yes, it's a great blessing and a great disaster. With Qingyang's talent, how could she give birth to a child?" Therefore, although the earth-shaking white lotus was good, it also deprived Qingyang of all her life. So, she gave birth to my son. At this moment, Han Fei and the old turtle almost said at the same time, "Reincarnate." Chapter 1293. They might not know who this middle-aged man was, but Han Fei did. In this world, there was no such thing as great luck. The water fairy's original form was a white lotus. The so-called white lotus shocked the world, and great luck probably had something to do with the water fairy. Han Fei suddenly thought of something and couldn't help but cup his hands at the middle-aged man. "Sir, are you from the Cloud Sea Divine Tree?" The middle-aged man raised his eyebrows slightly. Although Han Fei came with his daughter, Han Fei was a half-mermaid after all. Who was his enemy? How could he be completely reassured? However, the middle-aged man was confident that Han Fei was no match for him. Therefore, he hadn't attacked Han Fei yet. He was just on guard. The middle-aged man nodded. "Yes, you and I are enemies, but I have long been trapped in the demon's ceiling tower. Little brother, you don't have to give me a hard time, do you?" However, Han Fei's face began to change, including his body and aura. Under the gaze of the middle-aged man, the snake demon, the woman surnamed Bai, and the white snake, he turned from a half-mermaid into a human. Han Fei waved his hand, put on a battle suit, held a longbow, and said with a smile, "I am Han Fei from the Cloud Sea Divine Tree, Flying Feather Clan. Nice to meet you, senior." The woman surnamed Bai and the white snake both looked at Han Fei in surprise. This guy who had fought with them for 3 days was not a sea demon. The middle-aged man's body suddenly trembled. However, his face didn't change, and his voice was slightly low. "Transformation technique? This doesn't prove that you are from the Cloud Sea Divine Tree, does it? Since you can transform, it's hard for me to guess." Han Fei spread out his hand, and Jing Er's venerable token suddenly appeared in his hand. "Do you know this?" "Wow." The middle-aged man, who had never changed his expression since they met, was shocked at this moment. Even though he was already an undead creature, he still couldn't hide his shock. "Jing's venerable token?" Han Fei grinned. "It seems that you haven't been trapped in the demon's ceiling tower for a long time. Now, can you prove my identity?" The middle-aged man nodded slightly. "Of course." Han Fei immediately said, "Senior, may I know your name?" The middle-aged man was slightly stunned. "You prove yourself just to ask for my name? You didn't have to work so hard to ask." The middle-aged man cupped his fists and said, "Zhang Yao, Cloud Sea Divine Tree, Silver Bow Unit." Han Fei and the old turtle said at the same time, "Sure enough, he doesn't believe in white." At their level, they could guess a lot of things as long as a piece of information was exposed. For example, Zhang Yao's world-shaking white lotus was definitely not a coincidence. In this case, it made sense. Why was this woman surnamed by so powerful? There was actually someone in the advanced Tao-seeking state that Han Fei couldn't beat. He was so difficult to deal with, but he had never left the Yao ceiling pagoda. How could such a peerless monster appear so casually? To confirm his speculation, Han Fei asked again, "Senior, may I ask what your occupation is?" Although Zhang Yao didn't understand, he still said, "A soul warrior and a spirit gatherer. It's because I'm a spirit gatherer that I can live to see my son." Han Fei's heart sank again. If Zhang Yao was not a manipulator, was this snake demon? However, he had never seen a sea demon that could control spiritual plants like this. Even if it had the ability of a manipulator, it shouldn't be a snake demon. Han Fei took a breath and looked at the woman surnamed by in front of him. If I'm not wrong, this is the reincarnation of the water immortal, right? He had been looking for the water fairy for a long time. Little did he know that she was also saving herself. Furthermore, he had used such a method to be reborn. And this time, she was no longer a demonic plant, but a special creature that he didn't know what she was. Although Han Fei guessed a lot, the reincarnation of the water fairy didn't know his true identity. At this moment, the woman surnamed by seemed to be lost in thought. Why do I remember that my surname is Bai? Isn't my father's surname Zhang? Did I not inherit the power of my parents? Seeing the weird looks on Han Fei's face, Han Fei thought that this might be his own luck. Although it was a coincidence, it was also inevitable. The original body of the water fairy had lived for too long, and now only her soul was left. What happened to her body? She didn't even know. What Han Fei didn't understand was why the water fairy didn't tell him such important news when he was in the Thousand Mountain Ancient Realm. If she had told him earlier that she had begun to be reborn in another body, he wouldn't have been so anxious. At this moment, Han Fei didn't hide it anymore. He said, "To be honest, the reason why I entered the demon's ceiling tower this time is to find the news of the world-shocking White Lotus you mentioned." "Senior, do you know more about the world-shocking White Lotus?" However, Zhang Yao looked at the snake demon with a troubled expression. The snake demon said, "Yao, it's okay. Anyway, my death is inevitable. Since this is a human and he came for the world-shocking White Lotus, just give it to him." The middle-aged man said solemnly, "But you just saw our daughter." The snake demon sighed slightly. "I can die without regrets now that I can see her again in this life. Besides, our little girl has already become so beautiful. I should be happy." Han Fei suddenly interjected and said to the middle-aged man, "Well, senior, if you're worried about Madam's vitality and lifespan, I think this should be useful." Han Fei reached out, and a drop of the spring of life appeared in Han Fei's palm. The reason why Han Fei took out the spring of life was very simple. The water fairy had been reborn in his body. The water fairy's talent was so high that she almost sucked up her mother's lifespan, which led to Zhang Yao becoming an undead creature for the sake of entering the Tao. Even if it was to cut off this big karma, he had to return the favor. Fortunately, he was not too greedy before and directly used 3 drops of the spring of life. Who would have thought that it would come in handy at this time? Is the spring of life? Zhang Yao looked at the spring of life in Han Fei's hand in shock, and his eyes flickered. He hurriedly said, "Little brother, I have been arrogant all my life. I have never asked anyone for anything. I know how precious a drop of the spring of life is. But now I want to ask you to give me this spring of life. I will repay you with my life." The snake demon pulled Zhang Yao's arm, and the white snake stood up and looked at Han Fei. The reincarnation of the water fairy, the woman surnamed Bai, also looked at Han Fei. Han Fei looked solemn and directly pushed this drop of spring of life to the middle-aged man. Whether senior has clues about the world-shocking White Lotus or not, this drop of spring of life will be given to you. Han Fei has nothing to ask for. Zhang Yao took a deep look at Han Fei. "I can't thank you enough. We do have information about the world-shocking White Lotus. It's hidden in Qingyang's body. This is a White Lotus. The reason why Qingyang was able to survive all these years is because of this White Lotus. Only then did Han Fei realize that Zhang Yao was not a manipulator. Then where did the spiritual plants all over the ground come from? In this way, it must be the power of this white lotus. Han Fei hurriedly said, "Senior, you'd better take the spring of life quickly. A drop of spring of life can equal 100 years of lifespan, which is countless times better than the nourishment of qi and blood." The snake demon glanced at the equally excited middle-aged man. Who would want to die if they didn't have to? And it was at this moment when they were reunited with their family. Although Zhang Yao had turned into an undead creature, he still had his own intelligence. Except for the lack of vitality, he didn't look much different from ordinary people. Besides, in the snake demon's view, his daughter was back. This was a great time for family reunion. Who would want a happy event to turn into a funeral? Zhang Yao hurriedly said, "Madam, come on, open your mouth." Han Fei didn't know what to call the reincarnation of the water fairy at this moment. She looked blank. Was it because she was born cold, or because she hadn't awakened her memories? However, Han Fei guessed that before she entered the Tao, she probably wouldn't awaken the water fairy's memories. Since the water fairy had already thought of using this method to live another life, she must have thought of the problem of entering the Tao. If she still entered the previous Tao, then it would be meaningless to be reborn. The green snake's vitality was rapidly recovering. Her skin was no longer old, her hair was no longer withered and yellow, and her strength was also returning. The surrounding spiritual energy and energy were crazily drilling into the snake demon's body. It only took about 200 seconds for the snake demon to turn into a beautiful, plump, half-human, half-snake demon. Besides, as soon as she recovered, her strength was maintained at the beginning of the Tao-seeking state. Because she didn't come in directly from the outside world, the demon-suppressing pagoda wouldn't throw her into the third floor. Zhang Yao hurriedly asked, "Qingyang, how is it?" The snake demon was overjoyed and hurriedly cupped her hands at Han Fei. Then, a green light flashed in her hand, and she reached for her chest. The green light bloomed, and a white lotus appeared in midair. The snake demon said, "Benefactor, it was this white lotus that drilled into my body and gave birth to the girl. It was also this white lotus that took almost all of my vitality. It was this white lotus that managed to keep me alive until now." Han Fei's eyes lit up. This was definitely a small part of the water fairy's original body. He had seen it more than once. When the white snake and the reincarnation of the water fairy saw this white lotus, they were both shocked. They had an impulse to grab this white lotus. After all, this was the original body of the water fairy. Therefore, this kind of impulse was innate. However, Han Fei certainly couldn't give it to them. Otherwise, the reincarnation of the water fairy would still enter the wrong Tao. When they almost couldn't control themselves and were about to take action, they saw Han Fei reach out and grab the white lotus. Han Fei let out a long breath. Phew, found it. Chapter 1294. When Han Fei grabbed the white lotus, he felt that the petals of the lotus in Forge the Universe were shivering. Han Fei wanted to store the white lotus in Forge the Universe. But as soon as he thought of this, the massive amount of spiritual energy in Forge the Universe evaporated in an instant, which scared the fish dragon king. The old turtle also hurriedly said, "You can't. It's alive." Han Fei hurriedly gave up this idea. But even so, he had wasted nearly 100,000 caddies of spiritual spring. It was a pity. However, it was exactly because this white lotus was alive. So, at the moment when Han Fei was about to collect it, the surrounding space shook as if there was an earthquake. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, Han Fei pretended to be calm. The white lotus changed owners and the void trembled. "It's nothing." The snake demon couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. She had 100 more years of vitality, and her spirit was back. At this moment, she thanked Han Fei again. "Thank you very much, benefactor." Han Fei smiled and shook his head. "If you knew that your daughter was the reincarnation of a king, what would you think?" The girl couldn't help but ask, "Father, mother, why is my surname Bai?" It seemed that she had been holding back for a long time, and she finally asked this question. Of course, when she asked this question, She looked at the white lotus in Han Fei's hand. This question made the snake demon and the middle-aged man look at each other in bewilderment. Surname Bai? The snake demon was surprised. Girl, when you were born, we didn't have time to name you. At that time, you didn't know much about the world. How could your surname be Bai? After that, they all looked at the white lotus in Han Fei's hand. Han Fei said calmly, "The world-shaking white lotus is a natural spiritual treasure, an ultimate treasure bred from the chaos of heaven and earth. Miss Bai has been protected by the white lotus since she was a child, so she could survive in the demon-subduing tower and inherit some of the power of the white lotus. Therefore, she feels that her surname is Bai, which is also destined and natural." The woman surnamed Bai and the white snake were both slightly stunned. Is that really the case? Han Fei was sure that the reincarnation of the water deity was too naive and didn't know how to distinguish the truth from the falsehood. As for Zhang Yao and the snake demon, although they were not weak, they knew very little about the power of the water fairy or the treasures of the heaven and earth spiritual treasure level. They would not be able to withstand his deception. Han Fei said, "If I'm not mistaken, the original body of the white lotus may be in this demon sealing tower. Otherwise, such a good thing wouldn't have happened to you. Now that you and the world-shaking white lotus are connected by karma, I think it's better for Miss Bai to have the surname Bai. After all, the white lotus will protect her." Han Fei tried his best to bluff her, thinking Shui Xian was originally a white lotus. Don't reincarnate and change her surname to Zhang. When she regained her memories in the future, wouldn't she beat him up? The snake demon's expression froze. Benefactor's words make sense. Little girl, do you have any inherited secret techniques? The water immortal's reincarnation frowned slightly. She raised her hand, and spiritual herbs gushed out like a waterfall. Seeing this scene, the snake demon and the middle-aged man looked at each other. Sure enough, as Han Fei said, their daughter had inherited some of the power of the world-shocking white lotus. This was a little too miraculous. The middle-aged man couldn't help but ask, "What is my son's name?" The water immortal's reincarnation shook her head slightly. "No name." The middle-aged man was stunned for a moment. When he was about to speak, his arm was tugged. It was the snake demon who pulled his sleeve. The snake demon said, "Thank you for bringing the girl here, benefactor. If I'm not mistaken, the girl hasn't entered the Tao or reached the peak. Moreover, benefactor had entered this level as an intermediate explorer. This must be your means, right?" The middle-aged man nodded slightly. "Sorry, I overlooked it." The snake demon smiled lightly. Why did he give the girl a name? "Girl, what do you think?" Although he didn't know why, the water immortal's reincarnation nodded slightly, as if she trusted Han Fei. Han Fei's mouth twitched. Another name? However, she wouldn't dislike the name he gave her, would she? Even if she didn't like it, there was nothing she could do. This was karma. Who told your reincarnation to meet me? Han Fei paced slightly and thought to himself, no matter how good the name is, I have to brag about it first. She wants to beat me in the future? Remember, before I named her, I praised her for a long time. Han Fei said, "When I first saw you, Miss Bai, I felt that you were extraordinary. You're gorgeous and elegant, with bright eyes and smooth skin. Miss Bai, it's as if you're the embodiment of beauty, elegance, and nobility in the world. You are really an extremely beautiful woman that is rare in the world." Han Fei's face was not red, and his heart did not beat fast. Everyone was dumbfounded by his words. Even the white snake shivered when she heard it. The snake demon even secretly said to Zhang Yao via voice transmission, "Darling, has the benefactor fallen in love with our girl?" Han Fei's heart skipped a beat. "Sister, don't talk nonsense. If my teacher recovers, he will slap me to death." Han Fei quickly put on a serious face and said, "So, I think it's good to name her by Sujin. Bai is the surname of the world-shaking white lotus. Su is colorless and can also be called white. Zhen means chastity and purity and can also be called white. So it's really a good name." The corner of Zhang Yao's mouth twitched slightly. "It's indeed a good name." The snake demon nodded. "Benefactor is really extraordinary. It's indeed a good name." Han Fei glanced at the reincarnation of the water deity. She and Bai Ling were looking at him. Han Fei wondered why Bai Ling wasn't a green snake. That would be perfect. Bai Sujin and Little Qing would be perfect. If a man named Su Xian appeared in the future, he would be able to act in the legend of the white snake. Sure enough, the reincarnation of the water deity nodded gently, as if she liked the name. Even her eyebrows relaxed a little. Her life had been extended, and she had a name. Han Fei didn't want to watch the family drama. He hurriedly said, "Well, Senior Zhang Yao, do you know how to leave the demon ceiling tower?" Zhang Yao was slightly surprised. "Huh? Benefactor, you don't have a way out?" Han Fei didn't answer directly, but said, "I came in from the trial's secret realm in the White Shell Royal City. If I go out from there, I'll be in danger of being discovered. Is there any other way to leave the demon ceiling tower?" Zhang Yao put on a bitter smile. "To be honest, I really don't know how many floors there are in the demon ceiling tower. I only know that it's very dangerous here, but I've never found a way to leave. Now that I've woken up and my strength has returned, I may be restricted by the rules and have to enter the next floor." Han Fei asked in surprise, "Is there such a rule?" Zhang Yao nodded slightly. "It's not impossible to stay on this floor. However, bad luck will happen. A chaotic void will appear in the tower, allowing powerful enemies to attack and forcing me to go to the next floor. This should be a way for the demon ceiling tower to maintain its own balance." Han Fei had never heard that the demon ceiling tower had such a magical function. A chaotic void would appear. Therefore, the strong couldn't stay on the weak floor, and the weak could stay on the strong floor. After all, the weak couldn't break the balance. Bai Sujin frowned slightly. "Is it dangerous?" The middle-aged man shook his head slightly. "Girl, don't worry. I'm a peerless heavenly talent. I severed my own cultivation to come here before. What's the harm in doing it again?" The snake demon couldn't help but stiffen. "Yao," Zhang Yao relaxed. "Qingyang, don't worry. I'll be back soon." Han Fei, on the other hand, was thinking about something in his head. Chaotic void? How should he use the white lotus in his hand? If he guessed correctly, it was part of the water fairy's true body. Otherwise, it couldn't have been so powerful to prolong a person's life for so long. Also, the demon purification pot couldn't see through any information about the white lotus, which meant that the level of the white lotus was much higher than he had imagined. If the water fairy's true body was really on the bottom floor, he couldn't go down either. Even if he could defeat the half-venerable creatures, he couldn't defeat the venerable creatures. While Zhang Yao and his family were sighing, Han Fei suddenly interjected, "Wait, Senior Zhang Yao, you stay here for now. I feel that I can explore this white lotus first. If you can hold it for a few days, I can try and see if I can find a way to leave." If it was an irrelevant stranger, even if this Zhang Yao was a human, Han Fei wouldn't help him. In this world, there was no such thing as crying when people from the same hometown met each other. There were tens of thousands of races in the world. You couldn't help them just because they were all human, right? However, this person was the father of the water fairy's reincarnation after all. The cause and effect relationship was not small at all. Different from the father he met after he traveled through the river of time. This person was his biological father. Besides, if this Zhang Yao went to other floors, it wouldn't be easy for the snake demon to survive before it fully recovered its strength. After all, most of the creatures on this floor were peak-level, Tao-seeking creatures who had entered the Tao. After all, the water fairy hadn't entered the Tao or awakened her power. It might be fine to face one or two of them. She might be able to fight 3 or 4 of them. But if there were 10 or 8 peak-level, Tao-seeking great demons, it wouldn't be easy. Even he had hunted peak-level, Tao-seeking experts in the outside world. However, the outside world was different from the demon ceiling tower. In the outside world, peak-level Tao-seeking experts didn't necessarily mean that they had entered the Tao. However, in the demon ceiling tower, the ratio might be very high. Besides, when he hunted peak-level Tao-seeking experts, it was mostly because he launched a sneak attack and then cooperated with the old turtle to kill them. It wasn't a head-on confrontation. Thinking of this, Han Fei felt that for the safety of his teacher, this white lotus must be the key. Chapter 1295. Since the water fairy had already begun to plan and even separated a part of her body, she must be preparing for her rise again. Now that the white lotus was in Han Fei's hands, did it mean that he could contact the water fairy through part of her body? With a thought from Han Fei, Yuan Dao appeared, which startled Zhang Yao and the snake monster. Zhang Yao said in surprise, "A semi-venerable? No. Is this a puppet?" Han Fei nodded and said, "Senior, please protect me." Bam! 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 Under Han Fei's feet, a series of small arrays emerged one after another. Soon, a white mist completely engulfed the space he was in. With Han Fei's current attainments in arrays, even if the opponent had reached the peak of Dao seeking, she couldn't see through his arrays. In the array, Han Fei transmitted his spiritual power into the white lotus and said, "Master, Master, can you hear me, Master?" The old turtle said, "It's useless to call her like this. Obviously, it wasn't easy for your master to separate this lotus. It has been separated from her body. How can it work if you call her body through it?" Han Fei frowned. Is there no connection between them after they are separated? Demon plants are a very special kind of creature, and they're always inextricably linked to each other. Otherwise, how could the rootless lotus extend the snake demon's life for so long? The old turtle said leisurely, "Maybe some of the roots are separated too?" Han Fei frowned. He remembered what the water fairy once said to him. The roots of demon plants were like the souls of human beings. It was possible to separate the roots, but it would inevitably lead to a decline in strength. The water fairy was in the demon subduing tower, and the king of the Baibei royal city was just outside. Once the water fairy rashly separated the roots, her strength would be reduced, and the king might take advantage of her. The water fairy couldn't have thought of what he could think of. What the old turtle said was not unreasonable. What if the water fairy separated very few roots? However, even if the water fairy separated the roots, it meant that she also separated part of her soul. And this part of her soul was definitely not connected to the soul of her main body, suppressed at the bottom of the demon subduing tower. Otherwise, if the water fairy found out that he was here, she would definitely make a move. Han Fei couldn't help but take out the lotus petal from Forge the Universe. If he were to directly summon them through the white lotus, he might be restricted by certain conditions. However, what if he activated it with the petal? Buzz, buzz, buzz. However, the moment this lotus petal appeared, the white lotus trembled and actually began to spin on its own. There's hope. Han Fei's eyes lit up. A lotus leaf that could protect the water fairy for 80,000 years couldn't be that simple. The demon subduing pagoda was here, which meant that the water immortal should be within 10,000 miles of him. Now that he had seen a part of the water immortal's body, would the real body be far away? Moreover, the water immortal's body and soul were both in a deep slumber in the past. However, things are different now. Now, the water immortal's divine soul had awakened. Since the lotus leaf could sense her, she should be able to sense the lotus leaf as well. Since they could sense each other, why would they need to find each other by themselves? It was not a bad idea to wait for water immortal to find him. However, the old turtle poured cold water on him again. Han Fei, don't forget that this place is called the Demon Subduing Tower. I'm afraid that the teleportation barrier on each floor is different. You can break the array to the 4th floor, but it doesn't mean that you can break it all the way. The same is true for your master. Since she has been suppressed, it means that she can't cross the barriers. Han Fei said grumpily, "What are you talking about? I don't see any decent ideas." The old turtle snorted, "I'm teaching you. Everything needs to be considered carefully." The lotus petals were flickering and the white lotus was spinning. Han Fei felt the void tremble several times, but it didn't work. The lotus petals just trembled for a moment, and then nothing happened. Immediately, Han Fei's heart sank. As the old turtle said, the water fairy couldn't come over. Wait! Han Fei's eyes suddenly lit up. Hadn't Zhang Yao been sealing and suppressing his strength? If he no longer sealed and suppressed himself, he might face the chaotic void. Once the void cracked, It meant that at least 1 or 2 layers of barriers would be broken. Taking advantage of that moment, the water fairy would definitely seize this opportunity. While Han Fei was thinking, the old turtle said leisurely, "That's possible, but even if the seal is fully opened, this person can only reach the 6th floor at most. It's still unknown whether your master can cross over or not." Han Fei's eyes flickered. "This is the most likely way I can think of. Otherwise, I don't know if I will have a chance to come to this demon subduing tower again next time." At this moment, Han Fei chose to gamble that the water fairy's body could seize the opportunity to cross the barrier. Outside, Zhang Yao was still struggling to suppress his strength. The snake demon held by Sujin with one hand and didn't dare to disturb Zhang Yao. Zhang Yao said solemnly, "Sujin, I will go to the next floor eventually. You have great luck, so your strength must be extraordinary. However, your mother's strength hasn't recovered yet, and she still needs your protection. Wait for me to come back." Bai Sujin asked, "Are you going to lower your strength again?" Zhang Yao smiled bitterly. "This place can only be entered but not exited. There's nothing I can do. But if you have great luck, you may have a chance in the future." Bam! The mist was broken. Han Fei stepped out, and his eyes fell on Zhang Yao. Han Fei said, "Senior, if you no longer suppress your strength, which will cause the chaotic void to appear, then I want to completely release your strength." "Huh?" Bai Sujin frowned. "It's dangerous." The snake demon asked, "Benefactor?" Zhang Yao was very calm. As a person who could get the venerable Jing messenger token and a peerless heavenly talent favored by the queen, he certainly had his reasons for doing this. Zhang Yao said calmly, "Okay, when?" Han Fei was quite surprised that Zhang Yao agreed without even asking. Han Fei grinned. "Senior, you're so generous. I can't go out either, but I need to take a gamble. If I win, I may have a chance to go out." As soon as Han Fei said this, everyone, including Bai Sujin, trembled slightly. Zhang Yao said in a low voice, "Understood." Of course, Han Fei didn't immediately let Zhang Yao release all his strength, but waited for the family to get to know each other for a day. And he closed his eyes to feel his Tao seed. One day later, the 800-kilometer quicksand shook 3 or 4 times. In Han Fei's perception, there were creatures appearing on the edge of this sea of sand. Under the gaze of the snake demon and Bai Sujin, Han Fei and Zhang Yao looked at each other. Han Fei said, "We can start now." Zhang Yao asked solemnly, "Han Fei, are you sure you want to enter the chaotic void?" Han Fei immediately nodded. "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." Zhang Yao nodded solemnly and shouted, "Qing Yang, Sujin, step back." Crack, crack, crack on the surface of Zhang Yao's body. Bloody chains appeared one after another. Han Fei could tell at a glance that it was a kind of array. This Zhang Yao had actually used his blood essence to seal him, forcefully sealing him away. At this moment, the bloody chains were broken one by one, and Zhang Yao's aura soared as if he were riding a rocket. Bam! In only about 5 minutes, Zhang Yao had reached the level of a semi-venerable. His strength was still rising. Zhang Yao roared, "Han Fei, if you want, I can enter the Tao. My Tao is fine. I've already entered it once. This time, I'm just returning to it." Han Fei's eyes lit up. It would be even better if he could enter the venerable realm, which meant that he could break 2 barriers this time. Han Fei roared, "Enter!" Huh! A terrifying power swept hundreds of kilometers. However, this force avoided Bai Sujin and the snake demon very well. Han Fei perceived that many creatures had appeared around the sea of sand. Zhang Yao roared, "Anyone who enters the 800-kilometer quicksand will die." Then, Zhang Yao threw out an array that enveloped the sea of sand. In the next moment, Han Fei felt that the space was unstable and there were abnormal fluctuations. It seemed that a creature was trying to crawl in from the void. Zhang Yao stepped out and roared again, "Open!" The void cracked, and a starfish stretched out its long tentacles, trying to tear the void apart and crawl in. Zhang Yao grabbed at the void with both hands, as if he had grabbed dozens of bowstrings, pulled the bow, and shot it. At the same time, he roared, "Han Fei, I'll take it away. The rest is up to you." At the moment Zhang Yao stepped into the void, Han Fei activated his secret method and the Beast King art. He even used his power of the Great Path. His strength had already surpassed 1,000 waves. At this moment, Han Fei followed Zhang Yao closely and stepped into the void, holding the white lotus in one hand and the lotus leaf in the other. The two of them entered the chaotic void and went their separate ways. This was a chaotic void, which shouldn't appear on the 4th floor of the demon-suppressing tower. And Han Fei's strength was different from Zhang Yao's. Even if Han Fei went all out, he could only reach the semi-venerable realm. It was impossible for him to reach the venerable realm. However, at this moment, the void was about to be closed, and Han Fei heard a surprise voice. "You came so soon?" First update. Asking for votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 1296. Yes, Han Fei was right. He had just broken through the void barrier with Zhang Yao's help, and then he heard the water fairy's voice. This meant that the water fairy had known that he was coming. It was just that they couldn't cross the spatial barrier and directly pass through it. Even though Han Fei heard the water fairy's voice, he didn't see where she was. The water fairy said quickly, "Drop the white lotus in your hand." Han Fei immediately let go of the white lotus. The white lotus quickly drilled out of the void crack, turned into a shadow, and disappeared between Bai Sujin's eyebrows. It was so fast that Bai Sujin didn't even have time to react. Han Fei was also stunned. It seemed that the white lotus had nothing to do with the water fairy's re-entry. Otherwise, the water fairy wouldn't have done this. The moment the white lotus disappeared, the water fairy shouted, "Crush the lotus leaf." Han Fei didn't dare to waste any time. God knew where the disordered void would take him. Since the water fairy said crush it, he would crush it himself. The moment the lotus leaf was broken, it turned into a phantom lotus seat and fell under Han Fei's feet. Bam! 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 As if it had been hit many times, a large crack appeared on the white phantom shield of the lotus seat with every explosion. After 4 violent collisions in a row, Han Fei felt that the lotus seat under his feet could be broken at any time. Han Fei thought, "This is the power that can protect the water fairy for 10,000 years. How could it be broken so easily?" However, it was different from what Han Fei had expected. The lotus seat seemed to be full of cracks, but it didn't really break. During this period, Han Fei saw a terrifying giant mouth open as if it wanted to swallow him. He even saw a long whip try and tear open the void and drag him out of it. Han Fei even saw a web palm reach into the void and slap the lotus seat, making it tilt. Fortunately, the lotus seat emitted a white light and withstood the blow. Then Han Fei saw a white light appear in the void, which seemed to have been broken from the outside. Han Fei breathed a sigh of relief. This should be the exit. The water fairy had forcefully brought him from the 4th level to the level she was at. When the lotus throne emerged from the void, Han Fei's eyes didn't suddenly light up, but directly disappeared into a sea of spiritual plants. At least, Han Fei's perception covered thousands of kilometers. Countless white lotuses almost covered the entire range of his perception. Of course, seeing this scene, Han Fei didn't panic at all. So what if there was a white lotus here? This was his teacher's main body, and it wouldn't hurt him. Therefore, even though the white lotus was terrifying and each of its vines was extremely flexible and tough, a few of them could easily whip Han Fei to death. However, Han Fei didn't panic at all. On the contrary, Han Fei was very relaxed. He scanned the area with his perception and asked, "Sir, where are you?" However, a voice shook the world. "How did you get here so quickly?" I said within 100 years. It's only been a few months. Han Fei curled his lips and said, "Speed is the most important thing in war. Teacher, you don't know, but there are still many things waiting for me to do. So, it's impossible to wait for 100 years. The water fairy said angrily. "Who were you with just now? Why did I feel my own aura?" Han Fei said in surprise, "Huh? Sir, are you sure you don't know?" The water fairy was puzzled. "What do I know? I've only been awake for a few months. Now I can only feel your existence, but I haven't broken the shackles of my main body yet, so I can only feel that you're here." Han Fei immediately told the water fairy about Bai Sujin. The water fairy was stunned for a long time, and then her voice slowly became solemn. No wonder I couldn't establish a connection with my main body after trying for a few months. I'm afraid that my body has given birth to a new consciousness. Huh? Han Fei shivered all over and hurriedly said, "Sir, don't scare me. I can't defeat a king-level powerhouse now." The water fairy said, "It shouldn't be a big problem. Before I fell asleep, I'd already sealed the Tao of my main body. The newly born spiritual consciousness couldn't completely control my main body. I don't know how long it took for me to separate a part of my main body and come back through reincarnation." Han Fei immediately took a breath. Huh? So, Bai Sujin is not your reincarnation, sir? The water fairy said, yes and no. In fact, I didn't figure out why part of myself was outside just now. Do you know why I asked you to let go of that white lotus? Because that white lotus was no longer under my control. I was afraid that part of my main body would be controlled by others. If I brought it back, it would definitely stop you. Han Fei was puzzled. What about Bai Sujin? The water fairy said, it's the new spiritual consciousness that found a reborn body for itself. It has been living in the body of the snake demon you mentioned, not to prolong the snake demon's life, but to wait for its reincarnation to come back. In this way, when the two are combined, it can live in the reincarnation body and completely control its new body. Han Fei immediately said, not good. Then hasn't she succeeded now? The water fairy said, no, I still can't control my main body, which means that its spiritual consciousness hasn't completely arrived in Bai Sujin's body. Be careful, the old turtle warned in his heart. Han Fei directly teleported himself away with the star's transposition. Fuse. Gemini, divine technique. Han Fei didn't dare to be careless at all. When he learned that a new consciousness had been born in the water fairy's main body, he already felt a little uncomfortable. Now, when he guessed that there was still a new consciousness here, Han Fei was scared. That was a king-level creature. Even if it only had a little bit of a new consciousness, even if it could only use a little bit of its main body's power, it was still not something that Han Fei could defeat. At the moment when Han Fei flashed away, the place where he was just now had been pierced by countless vines. Therefore, at the moment when he appeared, Han Fei chose to use the Gemini divine technique. In order to prevent the other party from attacking him at lightning speed, the infinity water condensed into a bubble and directly wrapped itself. Sure enough, in the next moment, tens of millions of vine thorns instantly squeezed the infinity water to the point that it was about to burst. Explode. Before the infinity water was crushed, Han Fei directly chose to explode himself. Oh! Han Fei roared, and the 100 beasts' soul suppression roar burst out. In an instant, hundreds of beasts soared into the sky and roared again and again. Rumble, while the infinity water was exploding, Han Fei directly stepped out of the Great Plate Turtle array and waved his hand, and dozens of fish skin maps appeared, all of which were Great Plate Turtle arrays. The old turtle roared, come on, hide in here. Han Fei thought to himself, I don't have time to hide. In the second, Han Fei saw that a huge number of vines came at him again. The time to enter Forge the Universe had never changed, and it would take nearly 3 seconds to enter. BM. Before the second passed, Han Fei saw that his Great Plate Turtle array was instantly shattered like a piece of paper. Seeing that the situation was not good, Han Fei's body of white mist directly wrapped the black mist in the middle. Ice. As the white mist dispersed, these vines whipped again and directly scattered Han Fei. However, at that moment, Han Fei didn't feel the so-called pain, because he was mist himself. Besides, when the white mist dispersed, the black mist might not have been noticed because it was too dark, so it escaped the disaster. After all, in the eyes of outsiders, Little Black couldn't be seen. It was true that the water fairy was a king, but it didn't mean that her newly born consciousness was also a king. Otherwise, if a consciousness was born as soon as it was born, how could he fight? He would have been killed long ago, and the other party wouldn't have given him time to react at all. Come back. The white mist was shaken away, and Han Fei could only send half of himself into Forge the Universe. Ooh. The white mist dissipated again, and Han Fei really felt as if he was panting. While the vines couldn't do anything to him, the black mist Han Fei turned into a human form in Forge the Universe and called out Little Fatty. At this moment, Han Fei felt very strange. Half of him was in Forge the Universe, and the other half was outside. At this moment, the vision of the two could be shared. Han Fei shouted, "Master, your king-level soul shouldn't be suppressed by a new consciousness, right?" The water fairy didn't respond, but the old turtle did. "Pay attention to protect the soul. Your teacher has been in a deep slumber for too long. It's not impossible to seal your teacher's soul for a very long time, unless you find the seal and break it." Hearing this, Han Fei quickly condensed the white mist. He didn't dare to use his perception for fear of being torn apart. Han Fei only used Little White's talent ability to sense. Fortunately, Little White's ability was not bad. Even if a king was next to it, it still couldn't block its perception of the surroundings. Therefore, Han Fei soon found the place that the old turtle said was sealed by a formation. Agility of wind. The sealed place was only a little more than 1,000 kilometers away from him. With his speed, it would only take less than 2 seconds. In the white mist, a pair of phantom-like wings stretched out. After flying less than 500 kilometers, Han Fei felt that his soul was collapsing. The terrifying impact of the divine soul instantly defeated him. However, the white mist only stopped moving for a while, and Han Fei felt that his consciousness returned. At the moment when his consciousness returned, Han Fei realized that the Gemini divine technique still followed the characteristics of the twin yin-yang spirit swallowing fish. If one side didn't die, the other side wouldn't perish. In this way, Han Fei was overjoyed. This time, he rushed to the sealed place without any scruples. Second, asking for votes into this chapter. Chapter 1297. The new consciousness of the water fairy was also stunned, thinking, "I'm still alive?" After another sprint, Han Fei's soul was shattered again. However, Han Fei had already reached the big seal array. This time, his soul seemed to return a little slower. When Han Fei came back to his senses, he found that the vines covered in frost seemed to be trying to separate the white mist that he had turned into. Han Fei found that every time the white mist was shattered, it would take longer for his soul to wake up again. So if he was killed infinitely, the Gemini divine technique might collapse, and his soul would be reduced by more than half. He could barely survive in Forge the Universe, and this newly born consciousness might have underestimated Han Fei. The power of the blue sea smoothie slowed the vines that stretched over by half a beat, which delayed her a little time. After all, she was forcibly using the body of the water fairy. Seeing that he was really about to be separated, Han Fei thought quickly, "How can I gather my mist bodies together?" Suddenly, Han Fei had an idea and secretly activated the Tao Seed. "I can ignore space." Han Fei's eyes focused, and he saw his white mist bodies coming out from all directions. Some even ran out from the roots of plants. When the white mist gathered, the new consciousness was stunned again. What the hell is this? However, this time, Han Fei didn't dare to be unscrupulous. This was 2F*King difficult. In just 2 seconds, he had been killed twice. If he hadn't been prepared and thrown Little Black's body into Forge the Universe, he would have been dead at this moment. Even the old turtle was scared out of his wits. This was 2F*King scary. An intermediate explorer facing a king. He wouldn't know how to fight this battle, even if he had 10 turtle heads. Thankfully, Han Fei was smart enough to discover that his Tao could realize some simple things, such as increasing his strength and ignoring space, which were not too difficult to do. At the moment when the white mist body was reunited, Han Fei immediately realized that if this new consciousness could block space, it would be a little difficult for him. However, after 2 life-and-death experiences, Han Fei finally came to the big seal array. If one wanted to find the water immortal's true body among the millions of white lotuses, It would be impossible to do so without some ability. If the water fairy hadn't told him, and he didn't have Little White's ability, he probably wouldn't have been able to find it. At this moment, Han Fei saw a white lotus the size of a palm that was in full bloom with a pale green aura flowing around it. At a glance, Han Fei found that it was not a kind of array, but a simple seal power that had been repeatedly superimposed on it. That's right. This newly born consciousness had never left the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. How could she know any array formation? Even the water immortal himself wasn't proficient in arrays. How could this new consciousness know arrays? Seeing that it was just a simple seal power, Han Fei suddenly grinned. Taking advantage of the third spiritual attack, he quickly counterattacked. Stellar transposition. However, this time, he was no longer teleporting himself, but teleporting the space not far away in front of him. In fact, the stellar transposition could not only teleport himself, but it could also teleport the space not far away from him. Even if the power of the seal was extremely strong, what use would it be if it was sealed in the wrong place? At the moment when the seal power was teleported, the water immortal's voice sounded again. Bastard, you're just a mid-level venerable. How dare you try to occupy my body? You're courting death. In an instant, the void exploded. Han Fei heard a scream, and the space within 100 kilometers seemed to collapse. Following that, a large number of dark blue soul bodies appeared. Spare me. The water immortal had lived for tens of thousands of years. How could she spare an outsider who wanted to occupy her body? Even if she didn't want this body, it couldn't be taken away by others. Han Fei felt that in the space dozens of kilometers away, there was a sizzling sound as if something was being crushed. Then, a large number of ownerless souls appeared. The water immortal said, "Little Wang Han, was your soul injured just now? Try swallowing these ownerless souls." Han Fei sensed that his soul was indeed injured, but it seemed to be less than 20% damaged, and it could be repaired. So, it was not a big problem. At this moment, seeing so many ownerless souls in front of him, how could Han Fei bear it? Han Fei said, "Master, has the new consciousness died?" The water immortal said, "This time, I made a mistake. I didn't expect to be tricked by a new soul. Don't worry, I've killed her. As for you, even I thought it was too late to save you. I didn't expect that you could survive in such a situation." The water immortal's voice was obviously trembling. He didn't know if it was because he was scared or because he was afraid. Han Fei quickly breathed a sigh of relief. "I was scared to death. I thought I was going to die just now. Wait, let me take a mouthful of ownerless souls to calm myself down." Han Fei still didn't release the black fog. God knew if there'd be any accidents. Han Fei's way to collect the ownerless souls was also very simple, which was to use the soul splitting technique. He split out dozens of his divine souls and fused them into the ownerless souls, refining them before retrieving them. After half an hour, Han Fei had only swallowed about 1/3 of the ownerless souls, but he already felt that his soul was greatly strengthened. The water immortal said, "Okay, I know you still have part of your original body. I'm very sure that the new consciousness has died. You can come out now." The old turtle said, "I didn't feel any threat either." Han Fei slowly breathed a sigh of relief. In Forge the Universe, the black fog appeared. However, little Fatty was still lying in Forge the Universe. That was Han Fei's last insurance. No matter what, he had to keep it. When Han Fei deactivated the Gemini divine technique, the water immortal said in surprise, "This spiritual beast is really rare. It's even connected with vitality." Han Fei said, "Master, do you want to feel your original body? I'll eat this ownerless soul first." The water immortal asked, "You can still eat?" The old turtle also said, "Boy, how can you still eat?" However, Han Fei responded with a smile, "I have a painting. It's very extraordinary and can help me digest it." With that, more blue souls were split by Han Fei. Another half an hour later, these ownerless souls were finally devoured by Han Fei. Another 2 hours later, Han Fei quickly memorized the god-scaring painting. At this moment, 700 pieces had been uncovered, and he was still rapidly memorizing them. Han Fei didn't expect that a venerable-level ownerless soul could have such a great effect. It could help him memorize such a huge amount of God-scaring painting, which was really extraordinary. It was different from the epiphany in the demon-suppressing tower a few days ago. On that day, after the epiphany, Han Fei didn't have time to practice the God-scaring painting. But at this moment, Han Fei deliberately cultivated it. After another 3 hours, the God-scaring painting was completely memorized, and he had memorized 726 pieces. It seemed that Han Fei had reached the limit of his memory. In Han Fei's eyes, information emerged. Owner Han Fei, level greater than 74, Junior Explorer, Spiritual Energy 180,000/180. 000, Spiritual Power 29012/29012, Perception Range greater than 3,600 kilometers, Law Enforcer, Invincible Power greater than 348 waves, First Spiritual Heritage, Unknown. Second Spiritual Heritage, Unawakened, First Spiritual Beast, Twin Yin-Yang Spirit Swallowing Fish, Level 61. Second Spiritual Beast, Unawakened. Main Art, Sky Stealing Technique. Level 6 of Void Fishing, Venerable Level, Divine Quality. Seeing this scene, Han Fei was shocked. His spiritual power had increased by nearly 4,000 points. After the last epiphany, Han Fei's spiritual power only increased by 2,000 points when he became an intermediate explorer. However, after absorbing the new consciousness of an intermediate venerable, it had grown so much. As for the range of perception, Han Fei was not too surprised. After all, the memory effect of the God-scaring painting was obvious. It would be strange if his spiritual power didn't grow much. Even so, Han Fei was still not satisfied. Han Fei took a deep breath. It seemed that this trip to the gates of hell was worth it. Han Fei's soul power skyrocketed, which made the old turtle very excited. He thought to himself, this kid is too amazing. However, what surprised the old turtle more was not the power of the soul, but the means that Han Fei used to forcibly break the king's body and the will of a venerable. That could only be a means of Tao. Otherwise, he couldn't figure out how Han Fei could resist such a strong enemy and survive. Seeing that Han Fei had woken up, the water fairy said in a relaxed tone, "How is it, little Wang Han? How about the ownerless soul of a venerable?" Fortunately, this new consciousness has always been suppressed at the bottom of this tower. Otherwise, this ownerless soul wouldn't be so pure. Han Fei looked satisfied as if he had had a good meal, but he asked, "Master, what about Bai Sujin? This new consciousness shouldn't be completely dead. Part of her is still in Bai Sujin's body." The water fairy's voice was light. "It doesn't matter. Most of its power has been destroyed by you just now, and the remaining bit has been nourished by the snake spirit for hundreds of years. The price is quite high, but since she helped me create a reincarnation, it's not bad. It saved me a lot of trouble. Otherwise, I would have to find a way to be reborn myself." Hearing this, Han Fei immediately breathed a sigh of relief and rubbed his hands. "Master, you've been reborn. What about your original body? Don't give birth to a new consciousness. I can't stand that." The third update. Please vote. I haven't updated recently. I've been very busy recently. Very busy. I even feel that keeping updating is my limit. Please don't rush me. End of this chapter. Chapter 1298. Han Fei was still scared. Luckily, he had a lot of means just now. Otherwise, he would have been dead. However, the soul strength of the newly born consciousness was only that of an intermediate venerable. If it were a king, Han Fei didn't think he would have a chance to struggle at all. Although he didn't have a head-on battle with a venerable, Han Fei was shocked by the strength of a venerable. This was only the soul of a mid-rank Exalt Realm expert, yet it had killed him twice in 2 breaths of time. What would he do if a true mid-rank Exalt Realm expert was standing in front of him? Even if he had all kinds of means, he wouldn't be able to survive. At this moment, Han Fei felt that he was still too weak to participate in a battle at the venerable level. Besides, Han Fei was deeply aware of the terrifying gap between the explorer realm and the venerable realm. In any case, he had exerted all his strength just now. Even if he wasn't a half-venerable, he was at least a peak-level explorer. However, in front of the power of a venerable, he was still a piece of cake. At this moment, since the water fairy had dealt with the newly born soul and didn't want her body, wouldn't this great benefit belong to him? Then wouldn't this great benefit belong to him? Although Han Fei didn't know how to use it, the body of a king and the terrifying demonic plants would definitely be of great use to him. The water fairy said, "My body is useless to me. However, my body is alive. With your current strength, you can't kill me even if I let you. However, there are 3 ways to transmit the power of my body to you." Han Fei immediately perked up. What are the 3 ways? In front of Han Fei, a phantom slowly condensed. It was none other than the water fairy. The water fairy said, "The first option is for you to cultivate on this trip. I'll slowly infuse my main body's life force and power into your body, cleansing your flesh, meridians, and bones. Using the king's power to cleanse your body for 10 years will push your spiritual meridians to a level beyond that of a mortal meridian, surpassing the so-called rank 9 spiritual meridian. At the same time, your strength will at least reach the level of a half-venerable. You seem to have comprehended the great way, so when you go out, it shouldn't be a problem for you to become a venerable." Han Fei immediately shook his head. "Master, I'm no longer a mortal." The water fairy was slightly stunned. "You're no longer a mortal?" Han Fei said, "It's complicated. In any case, it's just that my meridians have been reconstructed and are no longer ordinary meridians. I don't even know what kind of meridians I have now. Therefore, the first method should not be suitable for me. Also, I have to return to my territory in 2 years. There's a great war waiting for me there." The water deity muttered, "The second method is to use all the power of my main body to form a lotus seat and many lotus seeds. The lotus throne could block all attacks below the king level. However, it consumed a lot of spiritual energy and energy. However, it shouldn't be a big problem for you. The lotus seed can help you break through to the next level, allowing you to improve rapidly in a short period of time. However, it would probably take at least 10 years to mature these 9 lotus seeds. The remaining main body will instinctively seek to survive, and I can't do anything about it for now." When Han Fei heard about the lotus throne that could block all attacks below the king level, he was shocked. If he brought this lotus back to the yin-yang heaven, wouldn't he be invincible? However, he didn't have 10 years to wait for a few lotus seeds. Although he knew that those lotus seeds would definitely have a heaven-defying effect, he didn't have 10 years. However, even if he didn't have the lotus seeds, he still had the lotus throne. If he returned to the yin-yang heaven with the lotus throne, he would have the capital to fight the 1,000-star city. The old turtle's voice also sounded in Han Fei's body. "This method is very good. It can save your life and improve your strength extremely quickly. It's just 10 years. It takes 100 years for me to take a nap." The old turtle felt that the water deity was already very kind as a teacher. This was a F***king great opportunity. Han Fei had chosen this opportunity, which meant that no one below the king realm could hurt him. Han Fei quickly came back to himself and continued to look at the water deity. "Master, what's the third method?" The water deity hesitated for a moment. "My suggestion is the second one, because the third option has both advantages and disadvantages, and it will even consume your strength in a short period of time." Han Fei couldn't help but wonder, what's the reason? Han Fei thought to himself, why would the body of a king weaken my strength? Shouldn't it be like adding wings to a tiger? Isn't it a great opportunity? The water deity said, "Little Wang Han, you should know that I have the death-seeking technique. My body is a lotus, which can be remolded and create a new body. The new body has no soul to control it. You can split part of your soul, put it in, and create an incarnation for yourself." "Wow," Han Fei exclaimed, "an incarnation?" This was different from the Gemini divine technique. The Gemini divine technique was essentially still one of him. However, these avatars were actually 2 of him. The water deity said, "Don't be so optimistic. Although you have an incarnation, if you want to control the new body, you need to split a lot of your soul. You may need half of your current soul power. Only in this way can the strength of this incarnation reach a balance with yours. Half. Han Fei was dumbfounded. Isn't this price a bit too high? He was just feeling complacent, feeling that the strength of his soul had skyrocketed and was already extraordinary. Who would have thought that this incarnation would directly take away half of his divine soul? However, Han Fei was still very tempted. He could swallow other people's vitality and steal other people's souls. As long as he fought frequently enough and killed enough opponents, although he couldn't make up for it completely, he could definitely make up for a lot. Besides, he hadn't mastered the God-scaring painting yet. If he spent some time visualizing and cultivating the God-scaring painting, if he could absorb the ownerless soul of a venerable, it wouldn't be a problem to choose an incarnation. Han Fei said, "Master, what are the benefits of an incarnation?" The water deity said, "In the short term, there are actually no benefits. However, an incarnation can cultivate at the same time as you. As an independent individual, it can cultivate one Tao alone. If you want to fuse it in the future, it can also be possible. At that time, your combat power will be doubled." Han Fei quickly asked, "Can I still separate them after the fusion?" The water deity paused for a moment. "No. After you choose to fuse them, your strength will soar, and you may even get 2 Taos. But since they have fused, they can't be separated, so there is no so-called incarnation." Han Fei asked, "Are there any other benefits?" The water deity said, "If you choose this path, you can let your incarnation cultivate in this tower. Although I can make my original body give birth to a new one, it doesn't mean that my original body will die. Your incarnation can constantly absorb the power of my original body to cultivate. The premise is that no one notices it. Otherwise, if someone notices that my strength has been greatly reduced, it will be useless." Han Fei said, "There are kings in the Baibei royal city, so this path may not work. My incarnation can't stay in the demon's ceiling tower. However, can the incarnation and the original body communicate at will?" The old turtle added, "To put it bluntly, there are 2 of you. However, you have to remember, once your soul is split, the soul of your original body and the soul of your incarnation may not be connected. Although you are in an active position, you will only perceive each other when you're close to each other. If you're too far away, you may not know what you are doing." Han Fei was a little stunned. "What are you talking about? I don't know what I'm doing. Speaking of which, it seems quite strange." Han Fei pondered for a moment. Generally speaking, he had temporarily separated himself. When his original body and the incarnation fuse, his strength will instantly increase a lot. Han Fei thought, "Once I return to the Yin-Yang heaven, I will definitely be in trouble. Why don't I leave some backup plans in the Shuemu heaven?" Han Fei suddenly said, "Master, if my original body dies, will my incarnation also die?" The water deity shook her head. "Of course not. The incarnation is also your original body, but when you split your soul, there's a primary and secondary soul. Once your original soul dies, the soul on the side of the incarnation will naturally become your original soul. And this incarnation will also become your original body." Han Fei immediately raised his eyelids. "I choose the third one. As the saying goes, if you don't think far ahead, you will have immediate worries." From a long-term perspective, the benefits of the incarnation were definitely above the lotus seat and lotus seed. If 2 of him cultivated, he could fuse them in the end. It was equivalent to having twice the time of others. How could there be such a good thing in the world? The water deity said, "Little Wang Han, do you have enough soul power?" Han Fei asked, "Master, can you still catch a venerable realm creature and give me some ownerless souls?" The water deity couldn't help but roll his eyes. "Do you think I'm omnipotent? You should know the space barrier in this tower. Now, I've given up my original body. Maybe I can cross the barrier and kill a venerable realm creature, but I can't bring it back. Besides, once I make a big noise, someone outside will definitely notice." Han Fei asked, "What if you take me with you?" As soon as he said this, the water deity looked to Han Fei as if he were a fool, thinking, if you stay here, I can keep you safe. Why don't you try other floors? The old turtle said, why are you in such a hurry? It's not a big deal. Just kill more people. One day, you will be able to make up for it. Han Fei's face suddenly darkened. What are you talking about? If I have a F*** chance to make up for it, wouldn't it be better? The water deity said, can you make up for it if I give you a lot of ignorant souls? Han Fei nodded quickly. Yes. Han Fei knew for sure. After all, his soul was split off by himself, just like a jar. Half of the water was poured out, but the volume didn't change. As long as he could make up for the other half of the water, it would be the same. The water deity said, Baisujin should be able to get some new consciousnesses. If you cut off that consciousness, there should be some ownerless souls for you. Han Fei's eyes lit up. That's great. First update. Asking for votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 1299. In fact, Han Fei knew very well that if he chose the second method, he would be almost immortal as long as he was a king. However, that kind of method also lacked experience, and it gave off a feeling of winning while lying down. Sometimes, winning without doing anything was not necessarily a good thing. With the Lotus Throne, at most, he wouldn't be afraid of being beaten up when fighting with others. But he had never been afraid of others at the same level. As for those who could beat him, even if he had a lotus seat, he would still be beaten up. After Han Fei firmly chose the path of an incarnation, a consciousness suddenly asked, Master, since you can rebuild a new body, why don't you recultivate with a new body? The water fairy said, I was going to recultivate, but not by rebuilding my body, but by starting a new life. I will turn into a seed, grow again, and blossom. In Han Fei's heart, the old turtle's voice praised leisurely. What great courage! Break and rebuild. This is the great ambition to fight again and walk on the path of immortality. Han Fei was slightly stunned for a while. Just from the water deity's words, one could tell that it required a lot of courage and boldness. He didn't even want his king's body anymore. Han Fei couldn't help but ask, what about Baisujin? The water fairy said, like you, after I purify the wisp of new consciousness in her body, she will still be my reincarnation. But different from your incarnation, she now has her own independent will. When she becomes stronger and stronger, she will eventually return. Hearing this, Han Fei was relieved. After all, no matter what, Baisujin was the reincarnation of the water fairy, so he didn't help her wrong. However, Baisujin was a trap set by the new consciousness, which intended to be reborn in a body. However, she didn't expect the water fairy to exist. Otherwise, he might really be attacked by the newly born consciousness. The water fairy said, since you said you were pressed for time, don't delay. By the way, if you split your soul, can you still suppress the ferocious creature in your body? Han Fei's eyes widened, and the old turtle's heart skipped a beat. Was he seen through? The water fairy chuckled. It's nothing. My body was almost in a half-dead state, so my soul was exceptionally strong. Last time, when I met you, I already had a feeling. This time, I'm even more certain that there's an old monster inside your body. Han Fei shrugged. It's okay. Master, you should know that I have a special soul treasure. The old turtle is now not being suppressed by my own soul, but by my soul-type artifact. Water deity said lightly, that's good. I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to suppress him. However, it knows all your secrets. Don't give a chance to come out easily in the future. The old turtle immediately roared. How can I be such a despicable turtle? I have my own path of the great Tao. Han Fei said angrily, Old Yuan, that's enough. Even my teacher couldn't hide it from you. How dare you call yourself an emperor? What a disgrace to the title of emperor. The old turtle, water fairy, didn't know who old turtle was, but she knew Han Fei. A person who could cross the river of time back and forth. And a person who had a terrifying master behind him would never allow a terrifying master to hide in his body. Therefore, since the master was already in Han Fei's body, he was probably suppressed. Sure enough, as expected, wasn't it already being suppressed? With Wang Han's personality, it was hard to say. However, with Han Fei's personality, he shouldn't be easily fooled by that creature. Water Fairy said, "Wait for 3 to 5 days. I need to mobilize the power of my body." 5 days later. In just 5 days, Water Fairy's body shrank at least twice as much. However, under the cover of one of the white lotuses, a lotus seed appeared and lotus roots grew out. Han Fei had already guessed it. So, my external incarnation is made of lotus roots? And in Han Fei's eyes, relevant information appeared. Name, Mixed Essence Lotus. Introduction. The King's Domain Lotus Demon used a huge amount of vitality and chaotic energy to accelerate the growth of your primordial chaos lotus. It has the miraculous effect of being immune to all evils, immune to poison, and able to subdue souls. It can be used to refine an external incarnation. Level, king level, quality, ultra quality contains chaotic energy. Effect, if eaten directly, anyone below the half-king level will explode and die. Those above the half-king level can be immune to all evil, immune to poison, and able to capture souls. When he saw the message, Han Fei almost drooled. This is really F*King strong. He had never thought that he would become like Neza. Han Fei even wondered if Neza's lotus root body was better than his. I don't think so. This is a real king's body, which is almost the same as an immortal's body. At this moment, Han Fei suddenly thought of something. Since the external incarnation is not a human body, why should I stick to the human form? Han Fei immediately said, "Master, can you give me 3 heads and 6 arms?" Water Fairy. Han Fei said, "Master, I think since I don't stick to the human form, I should maximize my combat power. I'm good at too many combat skills, and I can't use all of them with 2 hands. If I have 3 heads and 6 arms, I think I can beat countless people at once." Water Fairy said, "I'll have a try." Han Fei said again, when I need 3 heads and 6 arms, I'll have 3 heads and 6 arms. When I don't need them, I'll still have 1 head and 2 arms." Water Fairy said grumpily, "You're asking for too much. Don't take it for granted." Another 3 days passed. Han Fei saw a lotus root body appear at the bottom of the water. His body and appearance were based on Wang Han's, which made Han Fei quite sigh. On the ears of the lotus root body, there were 2 lotus seed earrings. Han Fei couldn't help but feel disgusted. "Master, I'm a boy. It's not appropriate for me to wear earrings, is it?" Water Fairy said grumpily, "What do you know? Those are your other 2 heads." Han Fei felt that he might have taken it for granted. Neza's martial arts of 3 heads and 6 arms could actually be found. It wasn't a particularly profound combat skill. However, the 3 heads and 6 arms technique was different from having 3 heads and 6 arms in real body. It was better to have 3 heads and 6 arms in real body. Otherwise, the combat skill could only be used as a secret method, and there was always a time limit. Han Fei had already planned to use the Universe Ring, the red armillary sash, the wind fire wheels, the fire-tipped spear, the 9 dragons' divine fire shield, the golden brick, and other divine weapons for his external incarnation. Tisk tisk. Just thinking about this, Han Fei felt that he would be fascinated by his own charm. When his external incarnation appeared, it would definitely shock the world. He would enter the yin-yang heaven without any resistance. In the past few days, both the old turtle and Water Fairy felt that Han Fei was weird. From time to time, he would smirk. Who knew what he was looking forward to? According to their logic, Han Fei was a strong master who had entered the Tao. After comprehending the Tao, it was only a matter of time before he became a venerable. Why did he always show his emotions? But Han Fei didn't care. Except for losing half of his soul, he didn't suffer any loss. Besides, his soul could be replenished. However, how much luck would it take to meet a strong external incarnation? Water Fairy shouted, "Little Wang Han, listen to my command. Split your soul. Begin." Han Fei's face froze, and his soul seemed to be torn apart. Large patches of dark blue divine souls were like smoke coming out of his body. Seeing this scene, Water Immortal was instantly shocked. Your godly soul power is so strong. After all, he was a king-level master. The water fairy could naturally tell the strength of Han Fei's soul power at a glance. Now, the amount of soul that Han Fei had split out was probably equal to all the soul power of an ordinary Dao-seeking state master. Han Fei's face was twisted, and he continued to separate. It's not done yet. Wait a little longer. At this time, Han Fei's soul had been separated, and he no longer felt the tearing pain at the beginning. However, Han Fei still felt dizzy when he separated too much of his soul. The old turtle didn't know that Han Fei's soul power was so strong. At this moment, seeing the endless separation, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. What a monster! How long has this kid been cultivating? How can he have such a strong soul power? After half of his soul was separated, Han Fei felt his body was floating, and his face became extremely pale. It took him a long time to stabilize his body. Water Deity took a deep look at Han Fei. She wrapped a ball of green light around Han Fei's divine soul and injected it into the lotus root's body. She said, "Little Wang Han, your divine soul power has reached the semi-venerable level." Han Fei grinned with difficulty. I don't know how strong the soul power of the semi-venerable level is. Water Fairy said helplessly, then you should recover first. You need time to adapt to the sudden loss of such a soul. Your external incarnation needs to be refined. Han Fei saw that after his soul was submerged into the body of the lotus root, there seemed to be a strange and enormous power gathering from all directions. That kind of power appeared to be a faint gray color. Han Fei's heart skipped a beat. For some reason, he felt that he also wanted that power. Han Fei couldn't help asking, "Master, what is this power?" Water Fairy said, "Chaotic Chi." Chapter 1300. When the Life Queen gave him the immeasurable fruit, it also contained a wisp of chaotic energy. But now, Han Fei didn't know how much chaotic energy had poured into his external incarnation. Now, the part of Han Fei's soul that was separated was being led by the Water Fairy. It was as if some kind of power was pushing him into a soft cotton candy, making him feel like he was being wrapped up. Han Fei didn't know until this moment that this was to make his soul more suitable for this new body. And the chaotic energy, like the flame used for refining, was the process of refining the embryo into a finished product. Because at this moment, his soul was separated. Half of his soul had entered the lotus root body. Therefore, this part of his soul was idle, but it couldn't move and could only watch. It felt as if he was pressed on a bed covered with marshmallows and someone was massaging him. Therefore, Han Fei's soul didn't have to pay attention to him all the time, because within a short distance, his soul was connected. So, while consolidating his soul power, Han Fei looked at his own data. At this moment, all of his parameters had declined significantly. Owner Han Fei, level greater than 74. Intermediate Explorer, Spiritual Energy 150, 000, Spiritual Power 14506, 14506, Perception Range greater than 1,800 kilometers, Law Enforcer, Invincible, Power greater than 292 waves, First Spiritual Heritage, Unknown, Second Spiritual Heritage, Unawakened. First Spiritual Beast, Twin Yin-Yang Spirit Swallowing Fish, level 61. Second Spiritual Beast, Unawakened, Main Art, Void Fishing, level 6. Sky Stealing Technique, Venerable level, Divine Quality. In fact, this result was even better than Han Fei expected. Han Fei pondered. After all, he had reached a higher height. If there were no accidents, he could easily return to his original realm. This kind of return, except for absorbing the ownerless soul, didn't require any epiphany. Now, his spiritual power and range of perception had been reduced by half, but the other things that had been reduced were not much. Of course, seeing that his perception range was 1,800 kilometers, Han Fei was relieved. After all, before his epiphany, his perception range was only more than 300 kilometers longer than it was now. Now, after splitting half of his soul power, Han Fei was already very surprised that his perception range was still 1,800 kilometers. However, Even though he had lost half of his divine soul, the range he could explore was about the same as before. This also explained another problem. The current perception of his divine soul was definitely not as secretive as before. In the past, if he had used soul manipulation to spy on others and eavesdrop on their conversation, others might not have been able to detect it at all. But now, if he were to do so again, there was a high possibility that he would be discovered by others. The reason why his perception range was still so large might be because he had previously cultivated the God-scaring painting. At this moment, the weakening of his soul made Han Fei clearly realize the importance of the soul. After all, the strength of one soul directly affected the amount of spiritual energy stored, and even weakened one's strength by more than 50 waves. Han Fei asked, "Old Yuan, how can the weakening of the soul also weaken the power?" The old turtle replied lazily, "It's only temporary." The divine soul was an extremely mysterious thing that could fully utilize the potential of one's body. It was just like a person in a normal state and a person in a weakened state. One's mental state was good, while the other was bad. Their strength also varied according to their states. Naturally, there was a difference in strength. When your divine soul is restored, it will naturally be fine. The example given by the old turtle was quite vivid. After hearing this explanation, Han Fei understood. The decline of all his attributes was caused by the weakness of his divine soul. In this case, he had to find a way to quickly restore his divine soul and return to his previous strength as soon as possible. That way, he would be able to handle a place like the Bai Bei royal city with ease. However, even if he was in a weakened state, he was actually extremely strong, not something that the Fish Dragon King and the others could compare to. Even if he encountered by Sujin again, he wouldn't be any weaker. After all, his strength was not weak at all. With such strength, Han Fei felt that it shouldn't be a problem for him to rank in the top 3 on the heavenly talent list of the Bai Bei royal city. Thinking of this, Han Fei was immediately relieved. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Halfway through the 3rd day, Han Fei suddenly felt that he was alive. That feeling was very strange. He was cultivating, but he felt that he was suddenly alive. Because of the connection of the soul, Han Fei perceived his current self from another place. Han Fei, who was cultivating, suddenly opened his eyes and looked at his lotus root body. Water Deity roared, "Little Wang Han, give me half of your essence blood." Han Fei dared not waste any time. He flipped his hand, and Snowmorn appeared. With a Chi La sound, he sliced open a wound on his wrist, and golden blood sprayed out rapidly. Compared to his divine soul, essence blood was not a big deal. He could make up for it with spiritual fruits. He didn't even have a chance to weaken himself. Han Fei couldn't help but ask, "Master, do you still need essence blood? I can give it all to you. I can still regenerate." Water Deity looked at Han Fei's golden blood in a daze. Golden blood? Why does it feel like the level of life is beyond the range of human beings? However, Water Deity immediately came back to herself and said, "No, I need to let your external incarnation adapt to it and let it generate other essence blood." When all the essence blood was absorbed into the external incarnation slowly opened its eyes. Han Fei's lips curled. "Master, is this the external incarnation?" Water Deity seemed to be weakened. "Feel it yourself. This external incarnation shouldn't be as strong as your current body. However, if one were to say that he was weak, he shouldn't be that weak. You can let it cultivate on its own and try another path." The two Han Feis looked at each other. The external incarnation looked at its head, but no information popped up. It seemed that the body had been changed without the protection of the demon purification pot. Since the demon purification pot was gone, it couldn't sense the old turtle either. Han Fei tentatively said, "Old turtle, old turtle, old turtle." Seeing that no one responded, Han Fei was relieved. It seemed that the external incarnation was much worse than the external incarnation in terms of treasures. Water Deity said, "Little Wang Han, you have to find a way out now. The power of my external incarnation has been greatly weakened. Almost half of my power has been used to build this external incarnation for you. It has fallen from the king realm to the half-king realm. If an expert investigates, I'm afraid that there will be a conflict. Han Fei raised his eyebrows. In order to build an external incarnation for himself, Water Deity consumed so much power, Han Fei didn't dare to hesitate. With a thought, he tried to put the external incarnation into Forge the Universe. However, a massive amount of spiritual spring disappeared in Forge the Universe again. The external incarnation trembled slightly and couldn't go in immediately. Horrified, Han Fei quickly stopped. Forge the Universe doesn't recognize me? External incarnation? Han Fei didn't pursue it. With a thought, the illusion of mountains and rivers appeared. Since it was not easy to enter Forge the Universe, he would enter the sea-quelling painting. After a while, Han Fei said, "Master, I don't know how to get out." Water Deity said, "I've given up my cultivation as a king. How can I not get out a few seals? However, if I break the seals by force, I may attract the attention of experts. If I transform into a new seed now and send you out, it's not impossible for you to be discovered. Let me think of a foolproof plan." Hearing Water Deity's words, Han Fei blinked and said, "Master, can I destroy this demon's ceiling tower?" Water Deity was stunned for a moment. "What nonsense are you talking about? There are many powerful creatures suppressed in this tower. Once they are released, the entire sea area may be plunged into misery and suffering." Han Fei scratched his head and said, "Master, there's one thing I forgot to tell you. Although we are not in the Sea Demon King City now, this place should be very close to the Sea Demon King City. It is the trial ground of the Sea Demon King City." Sea Demon King City? Water Deity was stunned for a moment. "Why am I in the Sea Demon King City?" Han Fei shrugged. "I don't know. Perhaps the Yao Ceiling Pagoda exists to suppress you." Water Deity asked doubtfully, "Is it really okay to release these powerful creatures?" Han Fei grinned and said, "Master, including my junior sister and your disciple, there are now 3 kings in this territory." Water Deity's eyes narrowed slightly. 3 kings? In that case, we can give it a try. However, this demon's ceiling tower, if I had my previous strength, I might be able to break it. Now, I'm afraid it will be a little difficult. In Han Fei's heart, the old turtle said, "Why should we break it? All he had to do was release those great demons. Then, throw this tower into the wall of death. It's best to smash a hole in it. Then release some creatures. Don't you know how to destroy it?" Shocked by the old turtle's words, Han Fei directly repeated the old turtle's words to the water fairy. If the demon ceiling tower was in chaos, wouldn't the White Shell King City be in chaos? If the White Shell King City was in chaos, wouldn't the Shui Mu Heaven be relaxed? Water Deity was still a little conservative after all. However, the old turtle and Han Fei were both lawless people. One was proud of being a demon, and the other was purely a troublemaker who wanted to see the world in chaos. The two of them hoped that the demon ceiling tower would collapse. Only in this way could they win in the chaos. On the 6th floor of the demon ceiling tower, Zhang Yao was fighting fiercely. Even as an undead creature, he couldn't bear the intensity of the battle here. It had been almost 20 days since he entered the Tao, but he still hadn't found a chance to lower his realm. At this moment, he was fighting a big crab. The terrifying power shattered the void. All of a sudden, a lotus throne appeared out of nowhere in the dark void. It had appeared on the 6th floor. And on the lotus throne, who else could it be but Han Fei? Han Fei shouted, "Senior, stand where you are and don't move." Hearing this, Zhang Yao didn't dare to move. He didn't know what kind of trick Han Fei was playing. He didn't know where Han Fei came from. He saw a phantom of mountains and rivers directly enveloping him. In the next moment, Zhang Yao disappeared in place, and the big crab still wanted to clamp the void. However, the lotus throne turned and the giant pincers collapsed, scaring the crab away. Bam! Bam! The void continued to shatter. With 2 more bangs, the space barrier broke again. On the 4th floor of the demon ceiling tower, in the 800-kilometer quicksand land, Bai Sujin clapped her hands, guarding the weak snake demon who was fighting with 6 big dragons. Bai Sujin, the new consciousness of water deity, had to protect this snake demon. After all, in terms of karma and the tribulation of mental demons, she had to protect this nominal mother. Otherwise, it was really unnecessary to make trouble for the great Tao. Suddenly, the void cracked, and Bai Sujin couldn't help but look up. However, when she looked up, she saw Bai Sujin's expression changed, and she exclaimed, "Impossible." Chapter 1301. In Bai Sujin's view, Han Fei's strength was only at the intermediate Tao-seeking level. With such strength, anyone below the 4th floor would basically die. How could he survive? However, when she saw the divine lotus throne, she was immediately horrified. Wasn't that existence sealed by her soul? How could she break through the seal? This divine lotus throne was definitely not something that could be controlled by her main soul. Her main soul wasn't that strong either. Therefore, that existence must have woken up and regained control of her body. Therefore, the consciousness at the bottom of Bai Sujin's heart was very frightened at this moment. Could it be that her main divine soul had been destroyed? She finally separated and crossed layers of barriers to come here. She had long lost contact with her main soul. Unexpectedly, she miscalculated. The illusion of mountains and rivers descended and directly enveloped the snake monster. Before the snake monster had a chance to react, Han Fei had taken her into the sea-quelling painting. And the 6 big dragons, feeling the horror of the divine lotus throne, had already fled. It could even be said that Han Fei coming through the void on the divine lotus throne was enough to frighten them. They had been in this demon summoning tower for so long, but they had never seen any creatures that could break through the void, and no one dared to do so. Bai Sujin was the only one left in the 800-kilometer quicksand land. That consciousness wanted to run, but where could she go in this demon summoning tower? Her 1,000-year plan was ruined by Han Fei at this moment. How angry was she? There were 3 small white lotus marks between Bai Sujin's eyebrows, emitting blazing light. She was trying to self-destruct. Humph! How dare a mere remnant consciousness try to commit suicide in front of me? Who gave you the courage? Bai Sujin was forced to kneel on the ground by a single thought from the might of a king. The lotus throne under Han Fei shot out a ray of white light and wrapped Bai Sujin. The newborn consciousness had no power to resist at all, and it was directly crushed by the water immortal. As the white light rolled, a large piece of blue soul was sucked into the lotus throne. However, the amount of this ownerless soul was far less than the previous batch. This was probably less than a quarter of what it was before. It should be said that the reason Bai Sujin was able to survive alone in the Yao summoning tower was because of this strand of consciousness. At this moment, this wisp of consciousness had already been destroyed. Although it was a small amount, it was not a small amount for Han Fei. Of course, Han Fei wouldn't mind. However, he did not have the time to absorb it yet. With a thought, Han Fei stored these ownerless souls and to forge the universe. Bai Sujin's divine soul was pierced through between her eyebrows. Blood oozed out of her 7 orifices as she collapsed to the ground. Han Fei cast a holy light technique, and the illusion of mountains and rivers reappeared, putting her into forge the universe. In the blink of an eye, all of this happened very quickly. It only took a few breaths of time. Han Fei shouted, "Sir, that's enough." Outside the White Shell Kingdom, there was an ancient tower that seemed to be made out of black stone in a ring-shaped mountain range about 100,000 kilometers away. The part of the tower that was exposed above the ground had 6 floors. On each floor, there were eaves extending out, and on each eave, there were also extremely thick chains fastened to the surrounding mountains. Therefore, this tower looked as if it was forcibly fastened to the bottom of the sea by countless chains. There were 6 floors on the ground and 24 eaves, and a total of 24 peak-level Tao-seeking experts were sitting cross-legged here. Among them, Bai Wushu and Yuqing, who had ambushed Han Fei, were sitting on the eaves on the first floor. The 2 of them were punished to guard the demon summoning tower for 30 years, and it had only been less than 3 months. Clatter, suddenly, The demon summoning tower shook slightly. All the iron chains that were fastened to the eaves began to shake, making rattling noises. Because it was at the bottom of the sea, both the tower and the chains were actually full of ordinary sea melon seeds, small conches, small starfish, and other creatures. These creatures were directly shaken into powder in an instant. The demon summoning tower seemed to shake slightly, but the impurities on the 24 chains were instantly shattered, revealing the steel chains that were shining coldly. At the same time, strange runes of arrays lit up. The people guarding the demon summoning tower all changed their expressions at this moment. Someone shouted, "Not good! There must be a powerful creature in the tower attacking the seal and strengthening the array." These 24 people, each with their hands, pressed the beginning of the chain they were guarding. When the runes lit up, they poured a huge amount of spiritual energy into the runes, causing the 24 chains to suddenly flash with a strange light. Yuqing glanced at Bai Wuxiu. "This is the demon summoning tower? It's just a slight vibration, and such a terrifying power is transmitted out?" Bai Wuxiu smiled bitterly. "What else do you think? This is just the power being transmitted out, and we haven't encountered the space turbulence yet. There was once a space turbulence, and a big demon almost got out of it. In that battle, even with the support of the array, as many as 13 people died, and only then did they barely defend the demon summoning tower. Otherwise, why do you think no one is willing to guard the demon summoning tower?" Feeling the terrifying power in the chain, Yuqing couldn't help but ask, Will it be okay?" Bai Wuxiu scolded, "Don't curse yourself. Of course it will be okay. It's just a normal vibration." Crack. However, as soon as Bai Wuxiu said that, a muffled sound resounded for thousands of kilometers. Just when everyone thought that this was a normal act of suppression, a huge crack appeared in the surrounding ring-shaped mountain range with a cracking sound. It was like the movement of the Earth's crust during an earthquake, and a huge crack appeared on the ground. How similar was the scene at this moment? The terrifying and huge cracks on a mountain in the distance were rapidly being torn apart and gradually enlarging. Immediately, someone roared, "Danger, danger! Do your best, don't hold back." In the demon summoning tower at this moment, there was a green vine that directly broke through multiple barriers from the bottom, almost piercing through all the barriers in the demon summoning tower. Han Fei could even see that the water fairy's body was withering. One after another, the vines and white lotuses withered after providing a terrifying amount of power. Han Fei asked, "Master, are you okay?" The water fairy replied, "I'm fine. Since I've given up this body, I'll let it play its last use. With my king-level body, I'll pierce through this 9-story demon tower." The water fairy's voice was cold and sharp. "All creatures in the tower, listen up. I'm going to sacrifice myself to break the tower. If you don't want to be suppressed and want to leave, you'd better try your best to destroy this place." King? Okay. In fact, the shock of the king's power was directly transmitted to the big demons in the demon summoning tower. They had to believe in the crazy attack of such a creature. Of course, some small demons didn't have such awareness. Through the layers of seals, Han Fei seemed to be able to hear some people questioning and wondering, how can there be king-level creatures here? Some creatures seemed to have guessed that there was a king-level creature here. Hearing that the king was going to break the tower, how could they not follow? As long as they broke the tower, who could stop them? On the 8th floor of the demon summoning tower, a giant shark suddenly opened its eyes. Dong! A terrifying power hit the seal on the wall of the tower. On the 7th floor of the demon summoning tower, a golden lobster stretched out its pincers and hit the wall of the tower. The tentacles of a large red octopus were like whips of death as they suddenly lashed out. Apart from the dangerous creatures that were suppressed on the bottom floor, countless other creatures began to crazily hit the wall of the tower. Because of the water fairy's words, the entire demon summoning tower was rioted and thousands of creatures attacked at the same time. Outside the Yao ceiling pagoda, rumbling sounds could be heard from all sides of the pagoda. Bam! A peak-level, Tao-seeking big demon was channeling spiritual energy into the array with all his strength. In the end, an explosion like a great bell suddenly rang in his ears. Like the descent of a demonic sound, its head exploded with a loud bang. Before he could react, his upper body was blown up. The terrifying power spread in all directions. One person exploded, and the surrounding area became unstable. At least 4 people spat out blood. Walala, the chains shook crazily. Someone yelled at the conch. Something is wrong in the demon summoning tower. Help! Dong, like a giant bell, an unknown power hit the demon summoning tower, and the ground of the entire demon summoning tower cracked. The arms of a peak-level, Tao-seeking big demon were instantly crushed into powder. A peak-level, Tao-seeking big demon was shattered into pieces. Oh no, hold on. The demon summoning tower is in chaos. Crack, crack, crack. Bang. Just as this person finished speaking, he saw the incomparably thick chain in front of him suddenly let out a zzz-ka-ka sound. Then, with a bam, it broke apart. Half of the broken chain whipped the tower, and the other half at the ring of mountains. It was a loud noise. The ceiling array of the person who had just spoken exploded. His body, like a porcelain doll, was shaken until it was covered in cracks. With a dong sound, a terrifying shockwave struck the body of the pagoda, causing it to explode. In the White Shell Kingdom, the moment the White Armor Emperor saw the suppressing demon pagoda tremble, he looked over. However, what he didn't expect was that even he thought it was just a slight shake of the demon summoning tower. He didn't expect that the next moment, the mountain collapsed and the chain broke. All venerables of the White Shell Kingdom, listen my order. Follow me to suppress the demon summoning tower. The White Armor Emperor's expression changed drastically. After countless years, the demon summoning tower finally moved. He had studied the demon summoning tower for too long, but he didn't dare to step in because he was afraid of the power inside. At this moment, under the White Armor Emperor's order, the spiritual energy in more than 50 places in the White Shell Kingdom shook. Some people broke through, some flew into the sky, and some tore the void to go to the demon summoning tower. The White Armor Emperor took a step and appeared above the demon summoning tower. However, the moment he appeared, a blue light bloomed on the tower. The remaining 20 peak-level, Tao-seeking demons on the tower suddenly began to tear their flesh. A large amount of vine algae grew from their eyes, ears, mouths, and noses. "Ah, my lord, save me." A white lotus grew out of Bai Wushu's chest. At this moment, it exploded with a boom. He had thought about who he would choose as his master after returning to the White Shell Kingdom. How could he know that as soon as he came to the demon summoning tower, chaos broke out in the demon summoning tower? What kind of fate was this? Seeing this scene, the White Armor Emperor's eyes flickered. These people couldn't be saved. How could they survive the attack of King? The White Armor Emperor pressed his big hand on the top of the demon summoning tower and said in a low voice, "You finally made a move." Chapter 1302. As the only king of the White Shell King City, the White Armor Emperor naturally knew the danger of the demon sealing tower. However, this danger had been dormant for too long. It had existed since it was discovered, but it had never erupted. The White Armor Emperor even once felt that the danger under the demon sealing tower might no longer be a threat. Until the moment when the White Armor Emperor became a king, he wanted to enter the demon sealing tower and look for the opportunity at the bottom of the tower. However, at that time, he felt the arrival of a king's aura, which seriously threatened him. At that time, the White Armor Emperor had just entered the king realm. He even thought that if there was a king lurking in the demon sealing tower for tens of thousands of years, its strength must not be underestimated. Therefore, the last time, he only made a tentative move. In the end, he didn't succeed. Until today, the White Armor Emperor had also tried to test the danger under the demon sealing tower many times. However, every time, he could feel an unparalleled and terrifying vitality. It was precisely because of this vitality that he felt scared. This made him suspect that the strength of the one below might have reached the end of the king realm. However, the existence at the bottom of the tower had never really made a move, nor had he thought of coming out of the demon sealing tower, nor had he shown any threat. Because of this, the White Armor Emperor had never wanted to touch the demon sealing tower. Even at this moment, when the White Armor Emperor first arrived, he still held the seal of the demon sealing tower with one hand, tried to continue suppressing the existence below. At least, he didn't want to let him out until the other party showed his identity and whether he was a friend or a foe. The Waterwood sky was only so big, and the three kings standing side by side already seemed a little cramped. If another one came, it might be the strongest one. Who could stand it? The White Armor Emperor was naturally also worried. Would this existence take over his White Shell King's city? Buzz, 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 one venerable after another came one after another. When they saw the ring-shaped mountains around them that were about to collapse and the two broken chains, they couldn't help but be surprised. Why did the demon sealing tower make such a big noise this time? Seeing that the White Armor Emperor personally suppressed the demon sealing tower, the venerables all guessed that the legendary existence in the demon sealing tower was coming out. The White Armor Emperor spoke again. I know that this demon sealing tower may not be able to suppress you. However, with the help of this grand array, it won't be so easy for you to break out. Who are you? The Water Immortal said leisurely. Let go. I will return to my wall of death. Don't force me to fight you. Hiss. Many people gasped. They didn't expect there to be a peerless king in the demon sealing tower. Some of them secretly pushed their power to the limit, intending to save themselves at this critical juncture. This was a battle between kings. If a war were to break out, martial highnesses like them would die if they were careless. While the White Armor Emperor's face was solemn, a clear voice sounded, I told you to F***CK off. In front of Han Fei, the Water Fairy might be a kind teacher. However, the Water Immortal was a king after all. How could you be so easy to deal with? Bang, bang, bang. In the eyes of the White Armor Emperor and the other venerables, green demonic vines stretched out from the ground around the Yao Sealing Tower. Every vine that stretched out was like a dragon swimming out of the depths of the sea, writhing and twisting, tightly gripping onto the body of the tower. On the 22 chains of demon suppression, vines unfurled and white lotuses began to bloom. Umph! The White Armor Emperor shouted in a low voice. You said to go to the wall of death. How can I believe you? Besides, if you want to take the entire Yao Sealing Tower to the wall of death, you will inevitably break a corner of the seal. At that time, all the monsters will go to sea. How can I let you go? As he spoke, the White Armor Emperor's millstone-like hand stretched out to 1,000 meters. Thousands of spatial cracks appeared around the Yao Sealing Pagoda. With a series of bangs, the vines exploded one after another. Each vine exploded like the power of the sea. Within 100 kilometers, sand and stones were flying, waves were rolling, the seabed was sinking, and even the seawater was flowing backward. Such a terrifying explosion flattened the surrounding ring-shaped mountains in an instant. All the venerables who came were horrified. Was this the tentative confrontation between kings? A casual blow seemed to have the terrifying power close to that of an advanced venerable. Moreover, in their vision, the white lotuses around the Yao Sealing Tower were even more terrifying than the green vines. Because under such a terrifying bombardment, those white lotuses were not damaged at all. Even the White Armor Emperor was a little shocked. This was beyond the scope of a tentative confrontation. It could be said that if he hadn't come in person, even if all the venerables of the White Shell Royal City came, they probably wouldn't be able to completely suppress this power. Swish, 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 swish. 3 white lotuses spun and flew towards the White Armor Emperor. The White Armor Emperor's face was solemn, and he was no longer arrogant. 2 big white gongs appeared out of thin air. The White Armor Emperor said, "Retreat for 1,000 kilometers." As the White Armor Emperor gave the order, everyone hurriedly retreated, knowing that most venerables couldn't resist a battle of this level. Dong bang, bang, bang. When the 3 white lotuses exploded, the 2 gongs struck together. A wave visible to the naked eye instantly shattered the surrounding mountains. Before the aftermath, under the violent impact of the shaking ripples and waves, the gravel within 1,000 kilometers was emptied. Huge waves thousands of meters high appeared on the surface of the sea, and a terrifying spherical space with a radius of more than 10 kilometers appeared at the bottom of the sea. This attack was so powerful that even the white armor emperor's sleeves had been shattered. His two arms were covered with bloodstains, and the surface of the two big conches that had just been summoned became distorted. The white armor emperor shouted, "Do you really think I can't do anything to you? If you continue to be unreasonable, don't blame me for attacking you with all my strength." The white armor emperor looked solemn, looking at the 9-story demon tower that had been completely exposed at the bottom of the sea. 8 of the demon-suppressing chains had been broken. If he allowed the person in the tower to continue to attack, it would only be a matter of time. It was only a matter of time before the outer seal of the demon-suppressing tower was broken. However, the white armor emperor was also a little frightened by the water fairy's strength. The terrifying power of the 3 lotuses had completely exceeded the limit of the demi-king realm and had reached the early stage of the king realm. Don't underestimate the early stage of the king realm. The water fairy's power was launched from the inside of the demon-suppressing tower. This terrifying power should have been greatly weakened by the demon-suppressing tower itself, but could still burst out such a terrifying power. From this, it could be seen how powerful the person inside was. In the demon-suppressing tower, Han Fei looked solemn. He didn't know what the battle outside was like. Anyway, the inside of the demon-suppressing tower was in a mess. Since the water fairy started attacking, the shaking had never stopped. The roars from different big monsters never stopped. But what really made Han Fei solemn was that the water fairy's energy consumption was too high. He didn't know how the water fairy attacked. Anyway, Han Fei saw that the lotuses in her body were withering one after another. Based on this speed, the water immortal's body would be destroyed in less than an hour. At the most, it would take half an hour. Han Fei asked, "Master, did you encounter any difficulties?" The water fairy said, "In order to condense your incarnation, my strength has fallen. Now, I can only use the power of my body to barely exert the combat power of a king realm warrior. If we fight outside, it's fine. However, the seal of the demon-suppressing tower limits my strength." Han Fei frowned. "Then what should we do?" The water fairy snorted lightly. "Let's try our best." Outside, the white armor emperor's face suddenly froze. He saw a total of 8 flower buds suddenly emerging from the void. He shouted in a low voice, "Are you crazy? We're separated by the Yao ceiling pagoda, yet you're attacking so recklessly. Do you want to die?" The water fairy's voice was cold. "I want to open the sky and go back to the wall of death. Let me ask you, are you going to let me go or not?" Anyway, this was the last moment of the water fairy's body. The water fairy was completely relaxed. She had never fought so crazily in her life. Frightened by the water fairy's words, the white armor emperor was shocked. This person wants to open the sky? Could it be that the reason why this person has been dormant for so long is to break through to the heaven-opening state? Yes, this person has never died. His vitality has always been extremely strong, far better than mine. If not, he would have taken action long ago. In order to open the sky, this person has been dormant for tens of thousands of years. His patience was terrifying. Hum, hum. 8 flower buds began to bloom, and rays of white light pierced through the sea. The lotus rushed at the white armor emperor again with brilliance. Inside the pagoda, water immortal shouted, "All living beings, lend this king a hand," and crash into the pagoda. Rumble, the white armor emperor, was speechless. There was no sign at all. How could such a terrible battle happen? Is the big shot inside accumulating power to the limit and is about to open the sky? However, even if this big shot wants to open the sky, why does she want to go to the wall of death? Is there the power to open the sky in the wall of death? The white armor emperor had some inexplicable guesses. He roared, "Stop! This prince will let you pass. You just want to go to the wall of death. Just go. I have no grudge against you. After all, we have been neighbors for so long. Why would I stop you?" Of course, Han Fei also heard the white armor emperor's words. When the white armor emperor spoke, Han Fei hurriedly said, "Master, don't believe it, don't believe it, don't believe it. You can't believe a sea demon. The water fairy's voice trembled slightly. Do you think I'm stupid? This person probably doesn't want to fight me head-on at this time. But I don't know what he has up his sleeve. The demon's subduing tower, together with part of the mountain, flew into the air like a fairy mountain crossing the sea 1,000 miles in an instant. The white armor emperor shouted, "Everyone get ready. There will be a battle at the wall of death. Kill the enemy with all your strength." Chapter 13:03. Because it happened so suddenly, the white armor emperor wasn't prepared. In a hurry, a super strong master who was ready to break through to the heaven-opening state came out of the demon prison tower. No matter what, he couldn't let this person live. First of all, this person was not a sea demon, but a super strong existence like a demonic plant. In the entire water would heavenly land. The cloud sea divine tree was a demonic plant. The blood sea divine wood was a demonic plant, and the life queen was still a demonic plant. None of these three were on his side. They were all his enemies. So, this lotus demonic plant couldn't be on his side if there was no accident. Most likely, it would still become his enemy. Even if the other party didn't become his enemy, even if this lotus demonic plant stood on the White Shell Royal City's side. So what? The other party could break through to the heaven-opening state. If she really succeeded, who would have the final say in the White Shell Royal City in the future? However, if he killed this lotus demonic plant, it might be another kind of opportunity. A king-level creature stronger than him happened to be trapped now. She happened to be in a disadvantageous situation, and she happened to be about to cross the wall of death. It could be said that it was the right time and place. It was all on his side. Even if he couldn't kill her, he had to seriously injure her so that she had no hope of breaking through. Only in this way could the balance be maintained. The demon prison tower was right next to the wall of death. Because of this, the creatures that occasionally rushed out of the wall of death would be locked in the demon prison tower. In mid-air, the demon prison tower was constantly rumbling, and those chains had already been uprooted. Countless big monsters were roaring in the tower. If they relied on themselves, it would be impossible for them to break out of the demon prison tower without becoming a king. Now, a king-level powerhouse had taken the initiative to stand up. No matter how stupid they would riot with him. When the 24 chains exploded, the sealing power of the Yao Sealing Pagoda suddenly weakened by a layer. However, although the chains were broken and the terrain collapsed, countless runes lit up on the body of the demon prison tower. Where on earth did the demon prison tower come from? It had a lot of tricks, just like the Avenger that Han Fei had built himself. Although he knew it would break, he couldn't break it in a short time. Time was of the essence. The water deity quickly said to Han Fei, "Listen up, according to the initial plan, when the king attacks, I will detonate the rest of my body. When the time comes, I will transform again and open up a void passage. I don't know where they can go either. However, with your abilities, it shouldn't be a problem for you to escape." Han Fei had no objection. Anyway, the water immortal had already decided to abandon this body. At this moment, why would he care about how much capital he had to invest? Inside the Yao Sealing Pagoda, countless creatures were attacking. The water immortal's terrifying power was exploding. On the Yao Sealing Pagoda, a large number of seals were shattering. The corners of the white armor Thearch's mouth twitched. It seemed that the creatures in the demon sealing tower had gone crazy. The white armor emperor frowned slightly. The origin of the demon subduing pagoda had always been a mystery. However, he had been guarding the White Shell Kingdom for a long time and knew that there were 3 entrances to the demon subduing tower. One was inside the Wall of Death. One was the forbidden passage of White Shell Imperial City, and the last was the Yao Sealing Tower. There was a door on the tower, which was on the lowest level. It was usually buried underground, but at this moment it was exposed. Except for these 3 entrances, there were no other entrances to the demon subduing tower. The White Armor Emperor knew this, but he didn't know whether the Lotus Demon knew it or not. At this moment, it happened so suddenly that he had no choice but to kill the Water Immortal. Han Fei couldn't see what was going on outside from the demon subduing tower. He only knew that the entire demon subduing tower was shaking. All the creatures here seemed to be on a rampage and were madly attacking the seal of the tower. At this moment, The water immortal stretched out his hand, and a spinning lotus flower appeared in his palm. It was so fast that it couldn't be seen by the naked eye. Pushed by the water immortal, it was directly pressed into the seal of the demon subduing tower. Han Fei could even see that in the seal, the array patterns overlapped with each other. At a glance, there must be hundreds of layers. It was the first time that Han Fei had seen such a terrifying array layout. This was beyond the scope of his ability. Han Fei thought that he was already very awesome if he could carve a ship array like the Avenger. However, at this moment, when Han Fei saw this magical combination of hundreds of layers, it was as if the demon subduing tower had put on 100 layers of battle armor. Therefore, it was naturally very difficult to break it with one blow. However, Water Immortal pressed White Lotus back into the array and said, "It only looks scary. If he really is a top expert who has surpassed the King Realm, he wouldn't have to use this method to seal this so-called suppressing demon pagoda. The fact that I can still break such a complicated array only shows that the strength of the person who set up the array is not as strong as I think. I suspect that this person is at most half a King Realm, and this demon subduing tower may just be a replica." Hiss. Han Fei took a deep breath. This is a F*King replica? This is already enough to suppress the King Realm. In Han Fei's heart, the old turtle also agreed. She's right. If it were me, I wouldn't have used such a complicated array to seal this tower. This tower actually can't suppress the King Realm. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to get out. The white lotus bloomed in the layers of arrays. The shadow of the lotus expanded rapidly. The petals, like magical blades, drilled a hole in the surrounding array. Han Fei said in surprise, breaking the array with force, "Master, this will consume a lot of energy." The Water Immortal said casually, "I've already abandoned this body, and I'm fighting with all my strength. Why should I be afraid?" The Water Immortal stretched out his hands again and threw out 2 more white lotuses, which made Han Fei's blood go numb. Although the Water Immortal didn't want his king body anymore, it was still a pity to see such extravagant waste. No matter what, in order to cultivate this king's body, the Water Immortal's hard work was definitely not small. He saw that the first white lotus had already drilled out of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda's grand formation, leaving an empty space. At this moment, Han Fei suddenly thought of something and immediately shouted, "Fuse!" When little black and little white fused, Han Fei suddenly took a breath. He actually saw the outside of the demon subduing tower from the inside. To be precise, it was not the outside, but the scene of the demon subduing tower sweeping through the void. After a few minutes, Han Fei saw a grayish-white mist. According to the flow of the mist, Han Fei could even be sure that there was a terrifying hurricane outside. It was common sense that the mist was blown away by the wind. However, the wind was extremely strong, and the void was also shattered, turning the surrounding mist into mist. However, Han Fei still sensed that he had arrived at the Wall of Death. Outside, the White Armor Emperor was also anxious. He knew that the Water Immortal didn't completely believe him, because the array of the demon subduing tower was broken one after another. Although compared with the countless layers of array marks in the demon subduing tower, there weren't many broken ones. However, for a king, it was possible to drill out of a hole when it was broken. Now, although the tower hadn't been broken, it might not be able to hold for long. The White Armor Emperor snorted coldly. "Aren't you going to the Wall of Death? Why do you want to break out now?" The Wall of Death was less than 10,000 kilometers away. The Water Immortal didn't really want to break through the Wall of Death. She just wanted to create an environment and find an opportunity to detonate her body and send Han Fei away. Therefore, when the Water Immortal saw the Wall of Death, the 8 lotus flowers outside the tower pierced through the void at the same time and smashed at the White Armor Emperor without warning. The White Armor Emperor's face turned cold. "Humph. If I knew you were up to no good, I wouldn't have left. Do you think I'm not prepared? Everyone, run 3,000 kilometers away." As soon as the White Armor Emperor said this, the group of venerables ran again. He had no choice but to run. Even the White Armor Emperor, a dignified monarch, had summoned his companion's spirit. Hum! At the moment when the 8 lotus flowers pierced through the void was torn, and a giant shell more than 1,000 meters wide emerged from the void. The white armor of the arch took a step forward and appeared inside the shell. Boom, boom, boom! 8 terrifying explosions in a row. It could be said that the bottom of the sea was capsized and the sky was cracked. Endless gray fog and hurricanes burst out, and the speed was so fast that even the wind blades could kill a venerable. The terrifying shell of the White Armor Emperor was blasted back more than 800 kilometers. The void cracks stretched across the sky. The White Armor Emperor gritted his teeth and shouted, "Since you broke your promise, don't blame me for being ruthless." The White Armor Emperor directly hit the demon subduing tower with the shell. Then there was a dang sound that connected the heavens and earth, triggering endless waves. Within 1,000 kilometers, all the creatures on the bottom of the sea were instantly crushed by this terrifying power. The demon's subduing tower was knocked out at a terrifying speed. It was about to hit the wall of death. The water immortal's heart skipped a beat. I underestimated the power of this king. If this wall of death was really as Han Fei said, it would be possible to crash into it. It wouldn't be easy to come out again. Open. Inside the tower, the water immortal's 3 white lotuses collided with the overlapping arrays one after another, forcibly knocking out the 8th, 7th, and 6th floors that suppressed her. The water immortal shouted softly, "If you don't want to stay here, rush out. I'll stop the kings outside. You can hunt those venerables." Huh! A terrifying black-striped shark rushed out, opened its mouth, and seemed to be able to swallow the sea. It said, "Thank you for opening the way, my king." A big octopus was extremely fast. It drilled through the void crack and shouted, "Thank you for opening the way, my king." A big lobster opened the void crack with its 2 pincers, rushed out, and shouted, "I'm finally out." At the moment when the demon's subduing tower crashed into the wall of death, more than 20 venerable big monsters drilled out of the tower. The White Armor Emperor had already walked out of the shell. However, he didn't have time to care about those venerables. He knew very well that he couldn't give the Water Immortal a chance to come out. The White Armor Emperor shouted, "Listen to my order, venerables, kill them." Among the group of venerables, 2 of Han Fei's acquaintances were there. Hai Ting Lei, the law enforcer of the royal city, and Chang Shui-Qin, the chief examiner of the secret realm. Both looked solemn at this moment. Hai Ting Lei even took a deep breath. "That shark is half a king. Let me fight it." Chang Shui-Qin said, "Let me handle that octopus." On the other side, the water immortal was like a white lotus. She had just blasted a path for herself when she saw a large gong blocking her way. The White Armor Emperor said, "If you want to come out, you have to ask me first." The water immortal frowned and stamped her feet, as if she had gone crazy. 13 giant vines clung to the exit in a row. She knew that she had to blast this way and force the White Armor Emperor to retreat. Otherwise, Han Fei wouldn't be able to get out. Once the demon's subduing tower was blasted into the wall of death, Han Fei might as well stay in the demon's subduing tower. Seeing that the water immortal seemed to be going all out, the White Armor Emperor immediately went all out. He couldn't let this person stay in the water with heaven. Otherwise, his status would be threatened. The White Armor Emperor roared, and the power in his hands surged as if he was going to attack with all his strength. "This is my domain. You can't stay here. Get out of here." Chapter 1304. Until now, the White Armor Emperor still felt that the Water Immortal was much stronger than him. Seeing the Water Immortal attack so crazily, he admitted that he wouldn't have been able to do it if it were him. After all, he knew very well how strong the seal of the demon subduing tower was. If he tried his best, he might be able to break out of it at the risk of losing much of his cultivation. However, how could a king be a fool? It was not easy to become a king. The White Armor Emperor had no idea that the Water Immortal was just bluffing with his last body. At this moment, the White Armor Emperor didn't dare to be careless. He believed that the more powerful and terrifying the water deity was, the more it meant that the water deity's true abilities far surpassed his. The white armor emperor blocked the hole in the suppressing demon tower with a big gong that he had polished for 10,000 years, which could be called a sea-quelling bizarre treasure, forcibly blocking the water immortal's way. The water immortal was a little confused. Are you so afraid of me? You'd rather sacrifice 2 sea-quelling bizarre treasures to block me? However, seeing that he was less than 3,000 kilometers away from the wall of death, the water immortal made up his mind. I don't even want my body anymore. Why would I be afraid of 2 elementary, sea-quelling bizarre treasures? Explode, rumble. Even Han Fei, who was inside the demon-subduing tower, was thrown away by this terrifying force. If it weren't for the hundreds of complicated arrays in the demon-subduing tower, Han Fei felt that he might have been crushed to death in an instant. Within this grayish-white fog, there were close to 30 battlefields. Because the force was too strong, the space here was dented, and cracks appeared in the void. Oh, bam! Maybe because they were too close to the wall of death, people could vaguely hear the roars of creatures in the wall of death, and some giant beasts and demons seemed to be trying to break through the barrier. Rumble, lightning fell all over the sky, and Hai Ting-Lei and the giant shark fought crazily. The two were fighting in the void, but at the moment when the lightning fell, with a crack the void shattered. The terrifying shock wave directly sent him and the giant shark flying. Hai Ting-Lei was shocked. A trace of the power of a king can crush the void. After the shock wave arrived, it took a full 3 breaths of time before the sound of metal clashing could be heard. A terrifying circular shock wave soared into the sky and covered a radius of more than 10,000 miles. The 2 gongs of the White Armor Emperor were now riddled with holes of all sizes. They had been blown into fragments of the sea-quelling bizarre treasures, and the exit could not be blocked at all. The White Armor Emperor's arms were stained with blood, his eyes were red, and blood was gushing out of his mouth. His entire body was forcibly blasted through the void and sent flying more than 5,000 miles away. The Yao Ceiling Pagoda wasn't any better. At least 10% of the complex and terrifying ceiling formation had been destroyed, as if a layer of its skin had been peeled off. This 10% seal couldn't be underestimated. If Han Fei slowly cracked this 10% seal, even if it was placed in front of him for him to crack, it would take at least 10 years. However, it had been destroyed in a single strike. Not only was 10% of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda's ceiling power destroyed, but the entire pagoda pierced through the void and crashed into an invisible barrier. Bam! Crack! 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 Han Fei couldn't believe it, and the corner of his mouth twitched, because he found that the Yao Ceiling Pagoda was stuck by an invisible barrier. Judging from the cracks formed by the terrifying power around it, half of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda had crashed into the wall of death, and the other half hadn't. The point was that the Yao Ceiling Pagoda was suspended in the air, with no top or bottom. It was stuck in the middle of the wall of death. It couldn't fall down, and it seemed that it couldn't be pulled out either. Han Fei took a deep breath. What's going on? The water immortal was also a bit confused. Is this the so-called wall of death? It seems a bit very generous. The old turtle was also a bit confused. It's the first time I've seen such a terrifying ceiling power. This is definitely not a ceiling boundary that a king-level creature can set up. The person who set up this formation has probably surpassed the level of opening the sky and may have reached the immortal realm. Han Fei raised his eyelids. Old Yuan, I'm not an educated person. Don't lie to me. You keep talking about the barren land and looking at the history of the Waterwood Heaven and the Yin-Yang Heaven. How can there be an immortal-level supermaster here? Why don't you say that there are gods here too? The old turtle said leisurely, in a sense, the immortal level is the realm of gods, the realm of fake gods. Gulp. Han Fei swallowed. What should we do now? Master, can we still go out? The water immortal was a bit unstable at the moment. Han Fei saw that her soul and willpower had become a lot fainter, and the area covered by her body was only about 300 kilometers. It could be seen how crazy the consumption was just now. The water immortal shouted softly, Little Wang Han, I didn't expect this person to be so stubborn. He used 2 sea-quelling bizarre treasures to block me in this Yao ceiling pagoda. He's here again. How could the White Armor Emperor not come? He was worried that if the Water Immortal came out, his white shell royal city would immediately be taken by someone else. He might even be chased to the point where he had no way to escape to the heavens and no gate to the earth. Therefore, this time, no matter what, he had to stop this woman. The Water Immortal glanced at the power of her body, which seemed to be a little bit insufficient. The Water Immortal said, "Little Wang Han, how did you come in?" Han Fei hurriedly said, "There is a forbidden area in the White Shell Royal City, and there is a hole in the forbidden area, which should be the weakness of the void of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. That's where I came in. However, after I came in, I couldn't find the way back." The Water Immortal asked, "Huh? Is there another way out of this pagoda?" The Water Immortal glanced around, and Han Fei felt that a terrifying soul power swept across the entire Yao Ceiling Pagoda in an instant. Boom! Outside, the Water Immortal and the White Armor Emperor fought again. This time, the Yao Ceiling Pagoda moved a little deeper into the Wall of Death. The Water Immortal suddenly had an idea. "Found it. You'd better bring me back the way we came. Whether you can survive or not depends on whether you can leave the White Shell Royal City or not." Han Fei said in surprise, "So simple? Then why do we still have to break through the seal? Master, why don't you come with me and destroy the Sea Demon's camp?" The Water Immortal said, "Didn't you say you were going to release these big demons? You want to smash a hole in the Wall of Death. I think it's not a bad idea to destroy half of the Sea Demon Royal City without my main body. However, I've underestimated the opponents of this era. Besides, this passage is too fragile. Even venerables can't enter it. If I leave, it will collapse in an instant." Han Fei was speechless. "Then what do we do now?" Wait for me to transform." From the very beginning, when the Water Immortal just woke up in the Thousand Mountain Ancient Realm, she already knew what kind of path she had to take. She was going to condense herself into an ancient big seed and be reborn. This time, she had been preparing for this big seed for tens of thousands of years. Once such a person was born, their innate talent would definitely be so terrifying that it would make people's hair stand on end. At this moment, the Water Immortal's soul phantom swooshed and turned into a transparent, glowing sphere. Then, the sphere began to frantically absorb energy that might be chaotic aura from all directions. At the last moment, the Water Immortal's voice echoed, "Little Wang Han, I'll fake the explosion of my body with the last blow and open a way for you. However, there are many space turbulences, and this way is extremely dangerous. If you perish, I'll still be fine. I'll still be able to drift about in the void. But you might really perish. So, leave your incarnation here, and I'll send you to the 3rd floor." Han Fei frowned and said in surprise, "Is it so dangerous? Master, wait a minute." However, Han Fei was obviously too late, because he saw 27 white lotus flowers that suddenly appear. Seeing this, his blood froze. The old turtle hurriedly said, "The so-called space turbulence was created by her own explosion. This woman is really ruthless." Han Fei thought, "Of course, I don't need you to tell me that. In the 100,000 mountains, there is no one who isn't ruthless." The White Armor Emperor didn't know the Water Immortal's plan. At this moment, he was holding the fragment of the sea-quelling bizarre treasure. He wanted to stuff these 2 pieces into the demon's ceiling tower and blow them up. The White Armor Emperor shouted, "I don't believe that you can still kill me with the demon's ceiling tower between you and me." Explode. At that moment, the battlefield fell into silence. Some of the creatures released from the demon's ceiling tower began to stop. After all, it was the king who decided the outcome of this battle. Whichever side's king won, that side would win. As the White Armor Emperor said, it was too disadvantageous for the Water Immortal to fight with the demon's ceiling tower between them. If the Water Immortal was defeated, they had to run away quickly. However, when the White Armor Emperor rushed to the demon's ceiling tower, he was dumbfounded when he saw 27 white lotus flowers. "Wow, lunatic! You're a lunatic!" Boom, boom, boom. Han Fei didn't know what was happening outside. Under the urging of the old turtle, Han Fei was holding a green seed the size of an ordinary peach pit and quickly drilling into a space crack. Now, Han Fei could only feel the vibration of the demon ceiling tower. However, it was no longer on the same floor as before, so he couldn't see what was happening outside. At that moment of crisis, Han Fei asked, "Old Yuan, will the demon ceiling tower be blown up?" The old turtle replied, "No, it won't. After all, it has been accumulated for tens of thousands of years. How can it be destroyed so easily?" Han Fei gritted his teeth, and the phantom of mountains and rivers appeared. His lotus root body appeared in the demon ceiling tower. Along with the lotus root body, most of Han Fei's resources were left. The old turtle asked, "Are you really going to stay?" Han Fei made up his mind. "Stay. The creatures in the demon ceiling tower are not weak. If I can come back one day, I will find a way to come back and take the lotus root body away. If I can't come back, this place will be my second body." Han Fei made up his mind. Compared with the treacherous yin-yang heaven, this demon ceiling tower could even be said to be a hidden paradise, especially when he was still on the third floor. If he was invincible on this floor, what was the difference between this and a hidden paradise? Dong, dong, dong. As soon as Han Fei's figure disappeared into the void, the sound of bells rang in his ears. Vaguely, there seemed to be a familiar voice, and he heard the white armor emperor shout, "Mu Wuhua." Unfortunately, this voice was too obscene. After all, the space had changed. However, because everything happened too quickly, it only left a trace in the void. Puff, 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 in the blink of an eye, Han Fei's body was cut with hundreds of wounds. Countless space cracks appeared around him. F***CK, fuse. After fusing with Little Black and Little White, Han Fei activated the Dao Seed and gave himself a layer of power. My defense is invincible. Chapter 1305. In fact, Han Fei wanted to give himself a prophecy that he could pass through this channel smoothly. However, as soon as this idea came up, he knew it wouldn't work. Although his great path was somewhat similar to the power of prophecy and could change some rules in a small range. However, it couldn't exceed a certain range. Obviously, directly predicting a safe result was completely beyond the scope of his great path. At this moment, Han Fei activated the Invincible Protective Cover. Under his feet, he used the Heavenly Void Divine Walking Technique to create the 64-dimensional Fish Dragon Dance. In this dark void, Han Fei was like a golden dancing elf, so fast that there was only a wisp of golden light left. It was different from the way he came. When he came, Han Fei directly entered through the weak point of the void. However, when he went back, the water fairy's body exploded and the terrifying power swept across thousands of kilometers. The residual power might not dissipate for years. In this case, Han Fei crossed the void, which was much more dangerous than when he came. Even though Han Fei's speed was extremely fast, there were hundreds of space cracks cutting his body almost every second. His diamond body lasted for about 2 minutes and was almost unable to maintain it. Bam! The diamond body disappeared, and the Invincible kept hissing as if there were countless knives cutting his body surface. Although the Invincible was also cut, Han Fei didn't panic at all. Under his feet, the coiled turtle array appeared one after another, and in his hand, he threw 7 or 8 great turtle array fish skin pictures at once. Even so, it took Han Fei a full 12 or 13 seconds to barely cross the space turbulence and reappear in the forbidden area of the royal city. The moment he landed in the forbidden area, Han Fei was covered in blood, and the golden blood stained his skin. This made Han Fei look as if he had been washed with gold powder. Han Fei's perception swept around and saw that there was no one around, so he didn't let a drop of blood fall to the ground. With a flash, he disappeared into the lightning prison. When Han Fei appeared in the thunder prison, he heard rumbling sounds and lightning struck down. Phew! Although he was struck several times in a row, Han Fei still breathed a long sigh of relief. As soon as he came back to his senses, a holy light technique descended, and the thousands of tiny wounds on his body quickly healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. As Han Fei flashed again, he appeared directly in Forge the Universe. At this point, Han Fei had enough time to rest. There should still be a month left. At this moment, Han Fei's soul was greatly damaged, so he needed to come in first and swallow the ownerless souls. The Fish Dragon King had been trapped in Forge the Universe for a long time. Seeing that Han Fei didn't appear with his own face, he immediately asked warily, "What are you going to do?" Ignoring him, Han Fei said straightforwardly, "No one is allowed to speak in my place." Not bothering to listen to the Fish Dragon King's nonsense, Han Fei directly sealed the small space where the Fish Dragon King was. In Forge the Universe, Han Fei's was above everything else. Han Fei continued to block the vision of the Fish Dragon King. After doing this, Han Fei reached out and grabbed the blue soul fire floating in Forge the Universe. The old turtle said, "Fortunately, you came back the way you came, otherwise I would have to control Gui Sanqing to escape." Han Fei curled his lips. "I wonder how the demon-suppressing tower is doing." The old turtle sneered. "What can you do? Your master blew up his body. That's enough to make that king suffer." Han Fei suddenly said, "Old Yuan, when I enter the channel, I seem to hear the words Mu Wu Hua." "Did you hear it?" The old turtle said, "You heard it right. If I'm not mistaken, it should be the life queen of the water with heaven." However, when Han Fei's body escaped, the battle outside the demon-suppressing tower at the Wall of Death was only halfway through. When he saw the water fairy's shocking blow, the White Armor Emperor finally realized that something was wrong. The water fairy didn't look like she was trying to come out. It was more like she was risking her life. If the previous White Lotuses were a way of fighting, he would have thought it was a way of fighting. However, when the last 27 White Lotuses broke through the void, the terrifying vitality made him panic. That was risking his life, wasn't it? At that moment, the shocking big shell reappeared, and the White Armor Emperor drilled into it, trying to escape. And nearby, the venerable big monsters who were fighting, seeing this, didn't care about fighting anymore. They directly tore the void and fled frantically, for fear that they would run too slow. Rumble! The unparalleled power covered 10,000 kilometers in the blink of an eye. Above the four seas, the wind was sweeping. Above the sky, a rain of blood was pouring down. No matter how fast those venerables ran, 5 or 6 of them were caught up by the explosion, and even their bodies and souls were directly blown to pieces. They couldn't resist at all. There were even more people whose hearts were filled with shock. A king had fallen? The heavens' cry is coming? The crimson crack in the sky couldn't be fake. Because the White Armor Emperor was in the center of the storm, the 2 gongs were completely destroyed, and he suffered internal injuries. The big white shell was bombarded by the 27 lotuses in a row, and a total of 9 cracks appeared on it. The White Armor Emperor was speechless. What happened to breaking through to the heaven-opening state? He even guessed that it was impossible for him to stop the Water Fairy. The Water Fairy was likely to come out. What's more, the White Armor Emperor was ready to open the big array of the capital. However, the Water Fairy died? At that time, the White Armor Emperor had too many doubts in his heart, feeling that he had been played. He was shocked, angry, and aggrieved, as if 10,000 iron-headed fish were galloping in his heart. However, this result was really out of his expectations. He guessed that the Water Fairy would be injured, escape to heal, and then attack the capital of the White Shell, but he didn't expect that the Water Fairy would die. He had been dormant for tens of thousands of years, and finally moved, just to die? This didn't make sense. However, the collapse of the Great Tao, the fall of the Heavenly Cry, and the rain of blood couldn't fool him. At any rate, he was a King Realm expert, yet he'd really perished today? Could it be that something happened that he didn't know? Just when the White Armor Emperor escaped into the void, he saw that the surface of the big muscle was suddenly covered with a layer of seaweed that looked like ivy. Countless green vines stretched out from the cracks of the big muscle. Muhua, how dare you leave the sea of clouds, divine tree? Puff! The White Armor Emperor vomited another mouthful of blood. Just now, the Water Fairy's self-explosion had really injured him, causing his strength to drop too much. he probably wouldn't be able to recover without 10 years. As for his companion spirit, the big muscle, it would be impossible for him to recover without 100 years. But at this time, Mu Wuhua came. The White Armor Emperor didn't expect that the Life Queen would know about the chaos in the demon subduing tower in advance. His first thought was that the fall of a king had shocked the entire Waterwood heaven. If he were Mu Wuhua, he would definitely come to the White Shell Royal City to investigate the situation as soon as possible. There was no other reason. He was the only one in the Waterwood heaven who wasn't a demon plant king. The one in the Bloodsea Divinewood City had the advantage of terrain. Mu Wuhua would definitely be afraid and wouldn't dare to go rashly. The Life Queen shouted softly, "Life deprivation." In an instant, the White Armor Emperor and the Big Muscle rushed out of the void. The Big Muscle's aura suddenly weakened by 30%. It was first bombarded by a king, and then by Mu Wuhua's sneak attack. The White Armor Emperor was furious. With a thought, he took back the Big Muscle. He held a green jade spear in his hand, pierced through the void, and shattered the strange life-devouring technique with one strike. The White Armor Emperor shouted, "Mu Wuhua, aren't you afraid that that guy will go to your Cloud Sea Divinewood?" Mu Wuhua chuckled. "You seem to be seriously injured. If I were him, I would come to kill you." In the void, a dull voice said, "Don't involve me in the battle between the two of you. This has nothing to do with me. However, I would like to ask, since both of you are not dead, who is the one who died? Could it be that a sea expansion stage creature came out of the Wall of Death?" The White Armor Emperor and Mu Wuhua fought together and shouted, "Why should I tell you the internal affairs of the White Shell Royal City? You only need to know that I'm still alive." The Life Queen smiled slyly. "Could it be that someone in your White Shell Royal City secretly broke through and became a king, but he couldn't resist and died, causing the heavens to cry?" This was the excuse that the Life Queen had long thought of to give the White Armor Emperor. In fact, the Life Queen had some guesses about this matter. Looking at the demon-subduing tower that was almost blasted into the Wall of Death, the Life Queen finally knew where the Water Fairy's main body was imprisoned. However, what surprised her was that Han Fei's efficiency was a bit too high. How long had it been? It hadn't even been half a year. Not only did he sneak into the White Shell Royal City, but he also found the Water Fairy and caused such a big trouble. The Life Queen didn't believe that the Water Fairy had died. Only demonic plants knew demonic plants better. The lifespan of demonic plants was very, very long. The Water Fairy had survived for so long, so there was no reason for it to die. Therefore, at this moment, the Water Fairy had died, which might also mean a new life. At this moment, even she was curious. What benefits did Han Fei get from the Water Fairy? What happened during this period of time? The battle between the Life Queen and the White Armor Emperor lasted only half an hour. After roughly understanding the White Armor Emperor's injuries, she said in a voice that spread in all directions, "All the venerables who escaped from the suppression of the White Shell Royal City, the Waterwood Heaven welcomes you. It's up to you whether you want to come or not." With that said, Mu Wuhua looked at the White Armor Emperor. Did that person die in the tower? The Waterwood Heaven wants a share of the opportunities there. The one from the Bloodsea Divinewood City just said that he wouldn't get involved. At this moment, seeing the miserable appearance of the demon-subduing tower, he couldn't help but add, "Everyone who sees it has a share. The Bloodsea Divinewood City naturally has a share too." The White Armor Emperor's face was extremely ugly. He really wanted to tear these two bastards apart. In this battle, the White Shell Royal City suffered heavy losses. The White Armor Emperor himself lost 2 sea-quelling bizarre treasures. After destroying a demon-subduing tower, his associated spirit was seriously injured, and he wouldn't be able to recover for 100 years. However, hearing that both parties wanted the opportunities in the tower, the White Armor Emperor sneered in his heart and thought, "How can the opportunities in the demon-subduing tower be so easy to get? Since you want it, then send someone over." However, the White Armor Emperor said, "Of course. However, the remaining power here is still strong. If you want to fight for this opportunity, let's talk about it in 10 years. Chapter 1306. The battle in the demon-suppressing tower this time was not really a battle between kings. Although the power that erupted in the end was completely at the level of a king, it was not enough, as could be seen from the White Armor Emperor's injuries. If the kings fought head-on, even if the White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen fought each other, the result would only be more serious. Although the White Armor Emperor still didn't understand why the one in the tower attacked, or the other party still had a chance to survive. When the battle was over, the White Armor Emperor had some speculations, but they were just speculations. In the demon suppressing tower, Han Fei lowered his head and looked at his lotus body, only to see his shoulders glowing brightly. With 2 puffs, 2 more heads, and 4 arms grew out of his body. It doesn't feel strange at all. In this way, I don't need little fatty anymore. I can also look around and attack in all directions. In the distance, a silver light brought a fish, striking horizontally like a long sword. In other words, only the monsters on the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th floors really ran out after the demon-suppressing tower shook. The 7th, 8th, and 9th floors were all the top masters, and there were only 5 or 6 of them, including the water fairy. The rest were all venerables on the 6th floor. However, not all of them ran out. Only about half of them had time to run out. Then, the passage was shattered by the battle between the White Armor Emperor and the water fairy. As for the 6th floor and above, there might be 1 or 2 space cracks that appeared occasionally. However, the creatures who could seize that opportunity to get out were completely lucky. All in all, there might be less than 10 of them. Because most of the creatures saw the hope of getting out, but they couldn't really run out, so they rioted. It could even be said that they were a little crazy now. For example, at this moment, Han Fei, as a stranger, had already been targeted by many creatures. Although Han Fei had come in the appearance of the Fish Dragon King before. However, these creatures didn't know that they didn't think that Han Fei and the Fish Dragon King were the same person at this moment, so they naturally attacked again. Han Fei grinned. What a stupid creature. It seems that the long imprisonment has made you lose your intuition for danger. Han Fei stretched out his hands, and 2 sledgehammers appeared in his hands. Han Fei was about to use the 100 Wars hammer, but as soon as he attacked, he immediately found that something was wrong. The 100 Battles' godly hammer wasn't as smooth as before. However, he couldn't care so much during a battle. Even if it was not easy, Han Fei did not forget how to fight. Just based on the basics, these creatures couldn't compare. Bang, bang, bang. In the water, ripples of light were shaking, and the silver ribbon fish was knocked askew by Han Fei 3 times in a row. In an instant, it exploded. Han Fei roared, "From now on, wherever Han Fei go, stay away. Otherwise, kill them." Han Fei was extremely arrogant and didn't care what these creatures thought. Bai Bei Royal City, Forbidden Trial Grounds, Lightning Prison. When Han Fei appeared again, his injuries had been completely healed. Some kind of electric arc flashed. There weren't many expressions of joy on his face. He said with a gloomy face, "You have a powerful soul for many years, but your soul power is so small. How pathetic." This time, after devouring all the ownerless souls, Han Fei's soul power only increased by about 1,200 points. Now, his soul power totaled 15,788 points. He wasn't weak, but he wasn't strong either. At least, in Han Fei's opinion, this number might not be as powerful as some so-called peerless heavenly talents. The old turtle said, "You've taken advantage of me. It's not difficult to make up for your soul. This time, you acted rashly, and being able to come out safely is already commendable." His soul was weakened. Although Han Fei was in the lightning prison, he didn't deliberately cultivate his body. Instead, he was visualizing the God-scaring painting. This time, part of the God-scaring painting had been unlocked, and the power and charm of the God-scaring thorn needed to be improved. In a few days, he would leave the Forbidden Trial Grounds, so he had to find a way to escape. Although there were still 2 forbidden grounds waiting for him in the Bai Bei Royal City, the ancient seed, transformed by the water immortal, was still here. The battle in Yin Heaven was quite urgent. If he mistakenly entered a forbidden mystic realm like the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, then no one would help him. Would he be able to come out? That was the question. On this day, Yu Qianxin reopened the forbidden secret realm. His first reaction was to look in the direction of the demon's ceiling tower. Seeing that the cave leading to the demon's ceiling tower didn't change, Yu Qianxin was slightly relieved. He had heard about what happened a few days ago. The Battle of Kings broke out, and the demon's ceiling tower was almost smashed into the wall of death. None of the creatures guarding the Yao ceiling pagoda survived. Thinking of this, Yu Qianxin couldn't help but shake his head. It seems that this secret realm is doomed. Behind Yu Qianxin, Chang Shui-Qin suddenly appeared, looking calm. Chang Shui-Qin said lightly, "Has the fish dragon king come out?" Yu Qianxin shook his head. "Not yet." Chang Shui-Qin nodded and looked in the direction of the demon's ceiling tower. "It's a pity that not many people can enter." "What a pity." Swish! While Chang Shui-Qin was sighing, Han Fei walked out of the Thunder Dungeon with lightning arcs bouncing on his body, looking exhausted. Seeing Han Fei, Yu Qianxin was shocked and asked in surprise, "You stayed in there for a whole month?" Han Fei didn't respond to Yu Qianxin, but maintained a cold posture. Chang Shui-Qin, on the other hand, noticed the problem first. He said, "Your soul seems to be unstable. What did you encounter in there?" Han Fei pretended to narrow his eyes and said respectfully, "I met a small snake in the lightning that could control lightning. The Dragon King was almost killed by the snake. Although I managed to escape, my soul was damaged." Han Fei looked awful when he spoke, as if he had suffered a great loss. However, Yu Qianxin asked in surprise, "You met the spirit of the Thunder Heritage?" Confused, Han Fei tilted his head and looked at Yu Qianxin. "Huh?" Yu Tianxin said, "It's an extremely rare creature that lives in the depths of the Thunder Dungeon. It's a great tonic for body refinement. Of course, that's if you can withstand it." Han Fei frowned. "It can also hurt the soul." Chang Shui-Qin said casually, "The spirit of the Thunder Heritage is pure yang energy that can suppress souls and other things. However, since you survived, it also shows that you have potential. When you go out, I can help you get a share of soul crystals, which will be less ownerless souls." Han Fei was surprised to hear that. Han Fei was refreshed. "Thank you, my lord." Chang Shui-Qin said casually, "Don't thank me yet. You will definitely receive a lot of attention when you go out. Everyone is waiting to see what rank you can get, including me." Han Fei chuckled. "I want to see my ranking too." Chang Shui-Qin nodded slightly. "Go ahead." After Han Fei left the forbidden area, Chang Shui-Qin slightly shook his head. "It's a pity that I didn't improve my level 9 demon heritage." For Chang Shui-Qin, it didn't matter how much Han Fei's strength and body had grown. If Han Fei's demon heritage could improve further, it would be worthy of his attention. Unfortunately, Han Fei didn't make it. This caused many people's expectations to relax. In the Baibei Royal City, heavenly talents were fighting in the sky, because 2 of the top 10 places on the heavenly talent roll had been eliminated. So, 2 more people came in to replace them. However, the strength of the replacements couldn't be recognized by everyone. So, people kept challenging them. It was only today that the 9th place was barely confirmed. The 10th place had changed 3 times. At this moment, a lobster demon and a clam girl were fighting for the 10th place. Down below, many people were watching the battle too. Maybe because it was boring, or maybe because it was the heavenly talent roll of the Baibei Royal City, many people were watching. Except for the top 3, almost all the people on the heavenly talent roll were here. Of course, the Fish Dragon King was missing, so he naturally became the topic of everyone's discussion. Someone said, "How long has the Fish Dragon King been in there?" "More than a month." "After such a long time, he should have died, right?" Someone shook his head slightly. "I don't think so. If the Fish Dragon King dies, there should be 3 vacancies on the heavenly talent roll. In that case, he won't be fighting for the 9th and 10th places." Someone sneered. "Who cares if he can survive?" Among the top 10 heavenly talents, the Fish Dragon King is the one I hate the most. His status is not that high, but everyone seems to owe him 80,000 caddies of spiritual spring. On the other side, Prawn Yue yawned and said, "The Fish Dragon King is not dead. It seems that he made a big breakthrough this time." Qing Siling asked, If he made a big breakthrough, wouldn't you be in danger? Prawn Yue said indifferently, I don't really care. You and little Tion are in danger. As Prawn Yue spoke, a black-headed half-mermaid carrying a black iron rod said, This time, it's my turn to fight the Fish Dragon King, isn't it? Qing Xiling couldn't help but smile. Umbrella 7, don't underestimate the current Fish Dragon King. In my opinion, it seems that you have no chance of winning. This person was the guy who ranked 7th on the Heavenly Talent roll. Another big black fish was born. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the distance. Someone exclaimed, Look, the Fish Dragon King is out. The moment Han Fei came out, he noticed that someone was fighting. He also noticed that Prawn Yue and the others were standing together. A battle between heavenly talents would happen sooner or later. According to the Fish Dragon King's character, he would definitely fight as soon as he came out. Therefore, Han Fei took the initiative to provoke him, saying in a distant voice, Umbrella 7, do you dare to fight me? Chapter 13:07. When Han Fei shouted, a phantom appeared and forged the universe, like a curtain, showing the scene above the Baibei royal city at this moment. Han Fei said, Fish Dragon King, is this scene familiar? The Fish Dragon King was shocked, widened his eyes, and exclaimed, This is the Baibei royal city. This is Umbrella 7? Han Fei grinned. Don't panic. I'll show you what a heavenly talent you are today. The Fish Dragon King was dumbfounded. What is Han Fei doing? When Han Fei shouted at Umbrella 7, in the battlefield above, the shrimp soldier's spear pierced through the void like a waterfall and knocked back the clam girl with a clang. The clam girl tried to control the shrimp soldier with spiritual lines, but the shrimp soldier's long whiskers broke the spell and cut off a piece of invisible silk lines. Immediately, a turtle prime minister shouted, Master Su Yi wins. The 10th place on the heavenly talent list belongs to Master Su Yi. But when the turtle prime minister shouted, he had already glanced at Han Fei. Compared with the battle for the top 10, the Fish Dragon King, who had just come out of the forbidden trial field, was what everyone really wanted to see. Although some people paid attention to Su Ye's advancement, more people exclaimed when they saw the Fish Dragon King. What? The Fish Dragon King has come out? Oh my god, he actually passed the Forbidden Land trial? Wow, this battle is going to be interesting. With the Fish Dragon King's character, there will be a series of battles. I wonder what kind of fortuitous encounter he obtained in the Forbidden Trial grounds. Is he confident to defeat Master Shrimp Yue this time? Someone guessed, probably not. After all, he only went to the Forbidden Trial field once. No matter how great the opportunities he got were, he couldn't have improved so quickly. Could he? The black-faced Umbrella 7 was annoyed by Han Fei's shout. This be asterisk starred, challenging me as soon as he came out? In the past, he didn't take the Fish Dragon King seriously. But since he came out of the secret realm, he heard that the Fish Dragon King and Shrimp Yue had a tie. This surprised him greatly. He thought to himself, did the Fish Dragon King improve so much? Now, Han Fei was being so arrogant. How could he lose face? So, you think you can really beat me just because you just passed the Forbidden Area trial field? Oomph. A cold and gloomy aura emanated from Umbrella 7's body. He pointed the big black rod in his hand at Han Fei. Fish Dragon King, you want to show off as soon as you come out? Aren't you a little too anxious? Han Fei sneered. I don't have much time. Since all of you are here today, I might as well challenge them. Umbrella 7, let me ask you, do you dare to fight or not? His dignity as a powerhouse, as a top Heaven's favorite ranked 7th on the Heaven's favorite roll, did not allow him to reject this challenge. Therefore, Umbrella 7 took a step into the air, and the black iron rod in his hand opened up with a whoosh, turning into a big black umbrella that spiraled upward. Sanchi said, Fish Dragon King, I know you have a great opportunity. However, don't be too arrogant. Otherwise, it will be ugly later on, and no one will clean up the mess for you. Roar! A golden dragon circled him and then soared into the sky. Han Fei became more and more arrogant. Even in the Baibei royal city, he didn't restrain himself at all. In Forge the Universe, the Fish Dragon King was completely dumbfounded. This be asterisk star not only used his identity, but also challenged Umbrella 7? F***CK. Although he was arrogant, he knew his limits. With his strength, there was still a gap between him and Umbrella 7. Why did Han Fei help him fight for a ranking? In the outside world, among the heavenly talents who were watching the battle, the corners of Qing Si Ling's mouth were slightly raised, revealing an extremely beautiful smile. It seems that the Fish Dragon King's strength has improved a lot in this forbidden trial. Prawn Yue looked a little more serious. If that's the case, then I'd like to see how much stronger he is compared to a month ago. As for the Baozhang Xiaodian, he didn't speak. He seemed to be watching a show. He was also very curious about which forbidden trial did Han Fei go to. After all, Han Fei was the only one who had gone to a forbidden trial field in the past few years. Therefore, his return immediately attracted the attention of most people in the Baibei royal city. However, even though Han Fei released his divine senses, he still noticed that there were a lot fewer masters who were perceiving him. Among them, Han Fei was more certain that Hai Tinglei was not there. The number of venerable realm masters scanning him was less than half of the number when he came to the Baibei royal city last time. Han Fei said calmly, "Old Yuan, the number of venerables in the Baibei royal city has decreased by more than half, right?" Han Fei's heart slightly trembled, and he thought to himself, if the water fairy killed half of the venerables in the Baibei royal city, then I've done the Life Queen a big favor this time. At least, I can pay off the debt I owe her. Otherwise, it doesn't seem right for a senior brother to owe a junior sister a huge debt. Also, the next time I return to the Shuimu heaven, shouldn't I, as a senior brother, give some greeting gifts to my junior sister? But the problem is, do I have any King good stuff on me? Han Fei was immediately in a dilemma. He thought to himself, it's really not easy to be a senior brother to this extent. Han Fei wasn't thinking about fighting at all. His eyes were wandering, as if he didn't take Umbrella 7 seriously at all. The old turtle said, "I don't think so. There should be a lot of venerables in the Baibei royal city." Han Fei was surprised. How is that possible? I can detect the perception of a venerable. The old turtle immediately sneered. What's the point of detecting the perception of a venerable? I'm looking at the heavenly secrets. Your divination art is still far from that. Otherwise, you would have found that the heavenly secrets of the Baibei royal city are still strong. This means that during the battle in the demon ceiling tower, your master's last attack didn't kill many people. However, the old turtle immediately added, however, the sacrificial attack of a king is not so easy to block. If I'm not mistaken, half of the experts in the Baibei royal city should be recovering at this moment. Including the king of the Baibei royal city, he should also be recovering. So, he just doesn't have time to deal with you. Han Fei's expression changed slightly. How many people was injured by the water fairy's sacrificial attack? Han Fei quickly came back to his senses and said slowly, "It's a pity. The demon ceiling tower must have blocked my master's attack. Otherwise, half of the Baibei royal city would have been destroyed." The old turtle said, "It's a good thing that no one is paying attention to you. You should have done most of the things you should have done. If you deal with it well this time, you'll have to find an excuse to leave this place when everything is calm." Suddenly, there was a sound. "Fish Dragon King, let me see what kind of fortuitous encounter you have. What makes you so arrogant?" Han Fei was chatting with the old turtle when he was interrupted by Umbrella 7. This person was holding a big black umbrella, which looked very weird. Han Fei snorted and ignored Umbrella 7. He looked down at Prawn Yue and said, "You're next." Prawn Yue said casually, "You win first." Seeing that Han Fei ignored him, Umbrella 7 was furious. "I'm the 7th on the heavenly talent list, and this is how you treat me? Confinement of heaven and earth." In the sky, a black umbrella descended like a mountain, and the umbrella ribs were like pillars, try to block the space where Han Fei was. However, for Han Fei, who had already comprehended the mysteries of space, he stomped on the ground and stepped into the void with the fish dragon dance, and then he used ground bending. In the eyes of outsiders, Han Fei seemed to have drawn a semicircle in the air and avoided the confinement. So fast. The faces of Prawn Yue and the others changed slightly. Han Fei's speed was even faster, and his understanding of the law of space was deeper. That was not all. At the moment Han Fei flashed out, the red spear in his hand pierced through the void. At this moment, Han Fei used momentary time and so close, yet worlds apart. It's a soul attack. Zhang Xiaotian only had time to say this when he saw Umbrella 7's hand shaking. He didn't even have time to react. He saw a black light descend from the edge of the umbrella like a veil. This veil also tried to block Han Fei's attack. Umbrella 7. Puff. Umbrella 7 was blasted dozens of kilometers away. His big black umbrella was really of good quality. It had the same freakish characteristics as Little Fatty, which could block spiritual attacks and physical attacks. However, no matter how strong this umbrella was, it had its limits. Han Fei's strength had improved after being tempered in the Thunder Prison for more than a month. How could Umbrella 7 block it so easily? Bam! Another hole was drilled through the black veil curtain. God's stunning stab. Hum! Umbrella 7's body stiffened. Han Fei used distance reduction and launched another spear attack at close range. Without giving him a chance to react, the instant mystic spear drilled through the hole again. Puff! Umbrella 7's body was penetrated by Han Fei's spear. Half of his body was blasted apart, and he fell straight down from the sky. This scene dumbfounded the Turtle Prime Minister, who was in charge of refereeing. How long had the fight been going on? This was just a face-to-face confrontation. The whole fight lasted less than 2 minutes, and Umbrella 7 was defeated? There was a dead silence, and then there was a buzz. Someone was shocked. What kind of technique is this? Umbrella 7's black umbrella couldn't even withstand 2 shots from the Ichthyosaur King before it was pierced. Someone was dumbfounded. What kind of opportunities are there in the Forbidden Land trial field? But Shen Yue and the others looked grave. Shen Yue said, he seems to have comprehended the closed distance technique to a higher level. Zhang Xiaotian nodded. Yes, although his law of time hasn't improved, I feel that his soul attack is stronger than last time. Shen Yue said, Tisk TSK. Interesting. Qingxi Ling, if I lose, you two can keep the top 5 places yourselves. The Fish Dragon King was the most surprised. When he saw that Han Fei, who was playing the role of himself, defeated Umbrella 7 in an instant, he had mixed feelings. Is this guy so strong? Why can he even imitate my closed distance technique? Different from what Shen Yue and the others saw, when Han Fei performed the soul-stunning spike this time, he found that he could fully use his current soul power. Perhaps because of his understanding of the God-scaring painting, the soul-stunning spike in its 70% state was even stronger than when he performed it before. However, Han Fei clearly knew that he had to find a way to leave the Bai Bei Royal City. Therefore, he couldn't keep winning. Otherwise, if he attracted more and more attention and was trained as a core seed, it would be troublesome for him to leave. However, this was the Fish Dragon King's personality. If he didn't show off and be arrogant, he might expose himself. He had already begun to act, so he had to keep acting. Standing proudly in the void, Han Fei pointed his spear at Shen Yue and Qingxi Ling, saying, if the Fish Dragon King hadn't been born, spear arts would have been like a long night. Today, I'm going to expose your undefeatable myth with my spear. Shen Yue, come and fight me. Shen Yue, in Forge the Universe, the Fish Dragon King. First update, asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1308. It was as if defeating Umbrella 7 was just an insignificant opponent. Han Fei didn't even bother to look at him. After all, for Han Fei, the so-called Sea Spirit heavenly talents didn't arouse his strong desire to fight anymore. Even if he suppressed his realm, he still felt that it was a dimensional reduction. Han Fei pointed at Prawn Yue and said arrogantly, which made many venerables droop their eyelids. They had no idea how this Astra-starred could grow so fast. How did he become so strong? Damn it. Can't you be a little more shameless? You were born to be the Fish Dragon King, and your spear is like a long night? How the hell can you say that? Countless people were speechless, thinking maybe the Fish Dragon King has become stronger, but his arrogance is also stronger than before. The Fish Dragon King was a bit embarrassed. Am I really like this? The Fish Dragon King, may be a little arrogant, but I won't say anything that comes out of my mouth. The Fish Dragon King roared, Han Fei, you shameless villain, you are a fake. Han Fei's voice rippled. Shut up. If you yell again, I'll chop you into pieces. Now, the entire Baibei royal city knows that the Fish Dragon King has obtained great luck in the Thousand Mountain Ancient Realm. To tell you the truth, I just helped you pass the trial field of the Forbidden Area. You should be happy. Huh? The Fish Dragon King was stunned. Trial field of the Forbidden Area? Are you King kidding me? Am I strong enough to go to the trial field of the Forbidden Area? In the outside world. Hearing Han Fei's words, someone said disdainfully, this guy is too pretentious. I really hope he dies in the Forbidden Area. Someone said helplessly, confidence comes from strength. He must have a certain level of confidence in his own strength. Otherwise, how dare he say such a thing? Prawn Yue flew in the air and chuckled. It seems that you have gained a lot from this trial. Han Fei grinned, revealing his teeth. I used to be a hidden dragon in the abyss, but now I have risen. It's time for me to change my position as a heavenly talent. Chilla. Before the Turtle Prime Minister shouted, suddenly, the two of them attacked almost at the same time. Prawn Yue's 6 spears pierced out and locked Han Fei's front, back, left, and right. Hiss, many people shuddered when they saw Prawn Yue's sudden attack. They thought to themselves, Prawn Yue's strength seems to be even stronger than what he displayed a few days ago. Someone quickly said, could it be that Lord Shrimpy Yue has made a breakthrough? Someone denied, of course not. Previously, Lord Prawn Yue had been ambushed. This time he was on his guard. The beginning of the battle will naturally be different. However, at the moment when the 6 spears appeared, Han Fei's figure almost turned into a shadow. The dancing fish dragon moved through the gap between the 2 spears. Then, she shook the spear in her hand and twisted it into a circle. Bang! With a shake of the red spear, Han Fei dodged all the spears and blocked 4 with 1 spear. Han Fei stepped out, stretched out 2 fingers, and used them as a spear. With a flash of fire, time froze, and the ground shrank to an inch. Prawn Yue seemed to have expected that Han Fei would make such a move. He had already made a judgment in advance and dodged. As he dodged, the 2 thorns on his waist stabbed at him. Ding! Pooh! The 2 of them separated as soon as they touched. The whole process looked like Prawn Yue's attack. Han Fei's body shook. Then, Han Fei appeared in front of Prawn Yue and separated with a single blow. It looked extremely simple. However, in the eyes of those with discerning eyes, they all looked solemn. This kind of battle feeling seemed to have reached the point where his movements were as agile as an immortal's. The 2 of them retreated as soon as they touched, and Prawn Yue touched his neck with his hand. There was a red scratch there. On the other hand, Han Fei was holding half of a spear in his hand and blocking his pair of daggers. Let's see the real deal in silence. Prawn Yue narrowed his eyes and stared at Han Fei for a long time. Fish Dragon King, you surprised me. I didn't expect you to be so meticulous. Fine, you win this battle. With that, Prawn Yue directly landed, and many people were dumbfounded. The Turtle Prime Minister was stunned for a while and then shouted, in this battle, Master Fish Dragon King challenges Master Prawn Yue. Master Fish Dragon King wins. Huh, wow, are you kidding me? That's it. Many people were dumbfounded. Who the *CK are you kidding? The 2 of them only collided and both looked unscathed. How could the winner be decided? In Forge the Universe, the Fish Dragon King, who was watching a movie, stared blankly at this moment. Han Fei's strength is so terrifying. He defeated Prawn Yue in just 1 round? Wait, what else does Han Fei want to do? Does he want to continue to fight? Defeat the Green Silk Spirit and Zhang Xiaotian? The Fish Dragon King's eyes widened. *CK. Even if Han Fei lets me go, how can I go back to the Baibei Royal City? Even when I was at my peak, I couldn't even enter the top 5. If I show up in the future, won't I be exposed? Besides, why did Han Fei deliberately show me what happened outside? What's his purpose? While the Fish Dragon King was lost in thought, A heated discussion had already begun outside. A Tao-seeking state creature said, "The top 10 masters on the heavenly talent list definitely won't have a life-and-death battle." However, the Fish Dragon King had a slight edge in the battle just now when the two of them were competing on the details. Don't underestimate such a small detail. In a real battle, you may be killed. The green silk spirit stopped laughing and said casually, "Interesting. He's trying to defeat us one by one." Zhang Xiaotian said, "He's very strong. Be careful." In the distance, Chang Shuai-Qin and Yu Tianxin were watching the battlefield. Yu Tianxin was a little surprised. His movement technique has improved, his strength has increased, and his understanding of the law of space has deepened. Although his soul has been damaged, his control over it seems to have improved. Yu Tianxin couldn't help but frown. Is this something that can be achieved in the lightning prison? Yu Tianxin couldn't help but ask, did he secretly go to other forbidden areas during the month? For example, the Well of the Abyss, the Divine Demon Sea, or the Demon Sealing Tower? Chang Shuai-Qin was silent for a while and slightly shook his head. "I don't think so. First of all, he can't go to the Demon Sealing Tower or the Divine Demon Sea. You didn't give him a spatial rune. How can he come out after going in? Besides, such a big thing happened in the Demon Sealing Tower, and the spatial channel must be full of dangers. He will definitely die if he enters it rashly. As for the Divine Demon Sea, it's even more dangerous. But if he survives, it's possible for his strength to soar. However, I don't think the Fish Dragon King is capable of that. As for the Well of the Abyss, it doesn't matter if he goes there or not. Maybe it's just an opportunity that he got. This time, he just consolidated and absorbed it." Yu Tianxin slightly nodded. His judgment was similar. No matter how strong the Fish Dragon King was, there should be a limit. At this moment, Han Fei looked at the green silk spirit and grinned. "Chatterbox, do you want to come?" The green silk spirit was a bit talkative. Now that Han Fei called her Chatterbox, she was slightly infuriated. She snorted arrogantly. "Fish Dragon King, don't you want to save some face for yourself?" Han Fei grinned. "I earned my face with my own hands. You used to think that I wasn't strong enough to rank 10th on the Heavenly Talent list. Now that I've defeated the top 5, let me ask you, do you feel ashamed?" Han Fei knew that this woman couldn't be weak. But no matter how strong she was, it was all relative. For him now, no matter how strong she wasn't strong at all. If he couldn't beat these people even with a dimensional reduction attack, it could only mean that he was too useless. After so many ups and downs, he couldn't even beat an ordinary heavenly talent. At least, the green silk spirit wasn't out of his plan. He needed to raise the Fish Dragon King's reputation to the highest level and then fall. Only by rising and falling could he find a reason to leave. Therefore, from the beginning, Han Fei's target was Zhang Xiaotian, the little baldy who seemed to be aloof from worldly affairs. Han Fei pointed his spear at the green silk spirit. "My time is limited. You can either fight me or get out of my way." The green silk spirit put on a fake smile and said, "You want to fight with little Tian? Well, let me tell you, you're not really invincible just because you've passed the trial field of the Forbidden Land." The green silk spirit walked in the air as if she were stepping on layers of ice. As she moved her hands, Han Fei saw that wherever his eyes passed, there were lines everywhere. These lines left a deep impression on Han Fei. They were a bit like the lines of light of the woman who once intercepted him in the ideal palace. Not only the lines, but the arrangement of these lines seemed to be some kind of array, causing the scenery in front of Han Fei to change. More importantly, Han Fei couldn't use the Yin-Yang Divine Eyes at this moment, could he? However, just because he couldn't use the Yin-Yang Divine Eyes didn't mean that Han Fei couldn't do anything. A dragon roar reverberated, and a terrifying soul power swept across the surrounding dozens of kilometers. This was a real dragon roar, which Han Fei had heard with his own ears. In order to match the dragon roar, Han Fei even projected a dragon shadow. Puff! The green silk spirit vomited blood and said in shock, "Why is the coverage so large? What kind of attack is this?" Han Fei shouted, I'll let you know that the Dragon King's bloodline has been awakened again. From now on, in the Bai Royal City, the Fish Dragon King will be a new legend. In Forge the Universe, the real Fish Dragon King opened his mouth and widened his eyes. After a long time, he said tremblingly, "It's over. I can't go back to the Bai Royal City." Second update. Asking for votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 1309. Han Fei had fully demonstrated the other uses of the 100 Beasts' soul-suppressing roar. Apart from anything else, this technique was based on the roars of hundreds of beasts. No matter who listened to it, they would only think that this technique was like this and wouldn't find out that Han Fei was faking it. After all, the beasts in the sea could also roar. This green silk spirit didn't expect that Han Fei's soul attack could be indiscriminate. Therefore, with a moment of carelessness, he directly fell for it. However, this woman was not a simple character. She vomited a mouthful of blood, and her eyes turned white. A spiritual attack also rushed straight to Han Fei's mind. However, although Han Fei's soul was almost halved, his soul was already several times stronger than others. So, with just a tingling in his head, he immediately shattered the attack. However, as soon as he shattered the impact, Han Fei found that there was an ocean of silk threads in front of him. As far as his eyes could see, there were silk threads everywhere. Except for silk threads, there was nothing else. Then, Han Fei saw that in the silk threads in all directions, hundreds of big crabs, sea spiders, sea silkworms, starfish, worms, and so on pouncing at him. When he saw these things, the corner of Han Fei's mouth twitched. "I hate bugs the most. You sent a bunch of fake bugs to attack me? Do you think that's enough?" Puff! Han Fei waved his hand casually. Although he felt a lot of resistance, there seemed to be silk threads entangling his arm. In addition, a bunch of wriggling bugs were exploding. However, the moment those bugs exploded, Han Fei's pupils suddenly constricted. Are these bugs actually souls? Or undead creatures? Han Fei immediately thought of Li Luoluo. When he had already fled the Thousand-Star City, Li Luoluo didn't come out of the ideal palace. The method of this green silk spirit was quite similar to Li Luo's. Li Luoluo was also good at illusions and could summon a large number of colorful and strange bugs. Now it seemed that Li Luoluo was also using her soul power to control the bugs. However, what Li Luoluo controlled were entities, while this green silk spirit controlled illusory creatures that didn't exist. On all sides, many people looked at the arena above the White Shell Kingdom that was almost covered in white. The dense threads caused many people's scalps to go numb. Regardless of which race it was, the most annoying ones were those prodigies who possessed exceptionally powerful divine souls and were proficient in all kinds of illusions, and enchantment spells. The corner of someone's mouth twitched as he said, "Although it's rare to see Lady Qing Ling in action, it's still extremely shocking every time. It seems that those who oppose Lord Qing Ling have all become her puppets." Someone said with some fear, "It would be good if he could be a puppet. At least he would have a physical body. I've heard that the souls of those who fall under Lord Green Silk Spirit's hands will never be liberated." Pran Yue looked up at the scene and said calmly, "How will the Fish Dragon King retaliate?" Zhang Xiaotian said indifferently, "The key is to break the illusion and find the azure silk spirit." Suddenly, a red spear shadow appeared in the sky. It was like a sword that could slash the heavens. It actually slashed out a red mark in the surrounding 10 miles. The scene was like an extremely enormous cloud being sliced into two by a bright red line, and it was extremely direct, as if it had broken out of a cocoon. Humph! Han Fei snorted and slashed with the Monkey King's 3,000 strikes technique. As a result, after the red crack, the silken space that was like a huge white cocoon was instantly sliced into pieces. Han Fei grinned. Spear arts can also be used to slash. Green silk spirit, take it. Han Fei slashed more than 200 times in the space. At first, it seemed that he missed every attack. However, after only 30 attacks, sparks flashed in the air, and 2 whips were colliding with the spear shadows. The azure silk spirit's face changed greatly. How did the Fish Dragon King see through her? Also, what kind of spear art is the Fish Dragon King using? One wave after another, and there were 200 waves in total. The power at this moment had completely exceeded the limit of her resistance. Crack! One of the long whips was smashed into pieces. The azure silk spirit appeared. The moment she appeared, she stretched out her hand and grabbed at the void, as if she were holding a handful of threads. However, when she was about to borrow strength, Han Fei had already stepped on her escape route. Bam! Puff! Han Fei held the spear backhand and slapped it, sending the azure silk spirit flying out of the battlefield, blood spurting out wildly. In Forge the Universe, the Fish Dragon King, who watched the whole battle, opened his mouth wide. The more ridiculous Han Fei's achievements were, the more he couldn't go back. Otherwise, he would definitely be seen through. After all, half of the people in the city had seen it. If he came back, there would be many heavenly talents looking for him to spar with. How could he refuse this spar? Wouldn't he be exposed? What would he say then? That someone pretended to be him? Once he found out that he had been replaced, what did Han Fei do in the Bai Bei royal city for so long? God knew what his relationship with Han Fei was. No matter what the reason was, his superiors wouldn't let him go. No matter how stupid the Fish Dragon King was, he knew why Han Fei showed him this scene, which was to tell him, don't even think about the Bai Bei royal city. You can't go back in this life. In the future, be obedient and maybe you can live. After being detained for such a long time, the Fish Dragon King was even a little disheartened. At this moment, looking at Han Fei, who used his own appearance to fight outside, he was a little fascinated. The Fish Dragon King thought to himself, really, he's so strong. In the outside world, everyone was shocked. Someone exclaimed, how is it possible? Master Azure Silk Spirit was defeated? So strong. What's the so-called bloodline awakening of the Fish Dragon King? He suddenly rose from the 10th place to the 5th place on the heavenly talent list? Is it really that amazing? Many Tao-seeking state demons were tempted, and some people were already standing in front of the Fish Dragon King's residence. At present, the rise of the Fish Dragon King was unstoppable. Besides, this person was very proud. If he flattered him, he would definitely help him in the future. The turtle who acted as the referee swallowed and slightly shrank his neck. In this battle, Master Fish Dragon King challenges Master Azure Silk Spirit. Master Fish Dragon King wins. In Han Fei's heart, the old turtle said, what if that little baldy is not as strong as you think? If you defeat this baldy, then you'll be the first on the so-called heavenly talent list. By then, it will be difficult for you to run away. Han Fei replied, I'm not wrong. The Fish Dragon King once fought with this person and was suppressed by Zhang Xiaotian with one hand. It didn't even have a chance to resist. This person is extremely strong in every aspect. Although I seem to be very strong now, my strength is only on par with Prawn Yue and Azure Silk Spirit. The gap is not very big. The old turtle said, I'm just reminding you not to screw up. Han Fei stood proudly in the void and sneered. Since I've already fought, I'll cultivate in seclusion and then fight in the trial field of the Forbidden Land. Zhang Xiaotian, why don't you fight me? Zhang Xiaotian scratched his head. Okay. Wow, the audience was in an uproar. Although Zhang Xiaotian didn't refuse anyone, the Fish Dragon King challenged him this time, which meant a lot. Zhang Xiaotian didn't refuse anyone. Anyone could challenge him at any level or rank. But the premise was that he had to be in the royal city. Many of them challenged Zhang Xiaotian just to get a taste of his strength. But today, the Fish Dragon King was different. He fought his way up one by one, from the 10th place all the way to the 4th place, and even killed 2 people. This strength was enough for the Fish Dragon King to be taken seriously. Zhang Xiaotian stretched out his hand and tore the void apart. In the next second, Han Fei saw the void crack 100 meters away was torn apart, and Zhang Xiaotian appeared. Han Fei's pupils constricted. A peak level sees spirit tearing the void apart. This strength could be measured by the Tao-seeking state. Zhang Xiaotian glanced at Han Fei casually. You become a lot stronger. Come on. Han Fei pretended to be angry. Last time, I was indeed no match for you. This time, This Dragon King will naturally fight with all his might. Then Han Fei really didn't hold back. He stepped forward with the closed distance technique and launched a soul-stunning spike. Swish! Zhang Xiaotian stretched out his hand and grabbed, tearing open several spatial cracks. Han Fei was shocked and subconsciously wanted to use the star teleportation technique and the flash ability. But he held back. As the Fish Dragon King, he had limited means and couldn't use those unconventional means. The dragon roared again, and Han Fei launched 2 soul attacks at Zhang Xiaotian. His own close-distance technique couldn't react fast enough. He was cut by the void cracks, and his battle suit was torn apart. Han Fei frowned, and blood flowed out of his body. Of course, it wasn't golden blood, but normal blood that Han Fei had prepared. A big eye appeared above Zhang Xiaotian's head. As soon as he opened his eyes, with 2 bangs, a terrifying soul shock shook the surroundings and easily broke Han Fei's 2 soul attacks. Down below, many people breathed a sigh of relief. Someone laughed. I knew that the Fish Dragon King was no match for Master Zhang Xiaotian. Someone chuckled. Of course, who on the heavenly talent list can fight Master Zhang Xiaotian head-on? A Tao-seeking state demon sighed. Master Zhang Xiaotian is too strong. Such an expert doesn't need followers? What a pity. A venerable state expert shook his head slightly. The Fish Dragon King seems to be much stronger, but it's still not enough. He's only at the same level as Prawn Yue and the Green Silk Spirit. Zhang Xiaotian nodded slightly. His soul power has become much stronger. Both his techniques are very powerful. His speed is several times faster, and his understanding of space is deeper. Now, I believe your bloodline has been awakened again. Otherwise, you wouldn't have become so strong. Han Fei pretended to be furious, as if he didn't believe the current situation. He couldn't help but yell, again, third, asking for votes. End of this chapter.